There he is. You. Maybe. Sorry. Hello, how are you? You were first one. Can you hear me? I feel like the mic is low. But...
Hundreds of
How are you?
people go missing under baffling conditions in national parks and forests all across North America. One former police detective named David Paulides has begun investigating thousands of these very strange disappearances, and he outlines his findings in a book series called Missing 411. Today, I'm going to be looking at 3 cases that all fall within the Missing 411 phenomenon, where everybody involved claims to have been chased by someone or something out in the middle of nowhere. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel, because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please give the like button a gift card to their favorite restaurant, but don't load any money onto it. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories.
How are you? Oh, I forgot to make this bigger. Sorry.
In 1989, 22-year-old Eloise Lindsay was a fresh college graduate, and she was at a crossroads in her life, because even though she just earned her degree, she really didn't know what she wanted to do with her life. And because she was an experienced backpacker, she thought a good way to, kind of get her life together would be to go on a sort of retreat, go out into the woods, go out into nature, and kind of find herself. So she had planned this very detailed 43.3 mile hike along the Appalachian Trail, starting in South Carolina.
Neurotic, thank you. Hello, how are you?
Where the first 7 days of the hike, she would be totally on her own, and then at the 7-day mark, she would meet up with a friend at a particular rendezvous point. Her friend would give her resupplies and would be her companion for the rest of the hike. When Eloise told her parents what her plans were, they were not concerned for her safety, because she was an experienced backpacker. She had made trips like this before. And so they said, great, we'll see you when you get back. So on November...
Monster, hello, how are you? Thank you, thank you. I wasn't sure if the mic was working very well. Lunchtime for you, nice. How's everything in Australia? Nyack, hello, how are you? How's everybody?
4th, Eloise sets out to begin her journey down the Appalachian Trail. And the first couple of days of her hike were great. The weather was beautiful, the scenery was amazing, and she had all this time to just kind of be by herself and look internal and think hard about what she wanted to do with her.
I'm good too, Monster. Nice to see you guys. How have you been? What have you been up to?
Her life. But on the 3rd day, when she woke up, she was sleeping inside of a tent she had camped just off the trail. She woke up and she had this intense sense of dread. She couldn't really place where it was coming from, but she knew something was wrong, and she's kind of doing inventory of her life, like, what did I forget? Is there something that I'm just not thinking about right now? But she kind of pushes it aside mentally and thinks, okay, you know what? I'm just going to pack up my campsite here and get hiking, and I'm bound to, come up with what it is that's making me feel this way. So she gets out of her tent and she begins packing up her campsite, and she's looking out, kind of scanning the tree line, not because she was looking for anything, but just because she happened to be looking out. And she could have sworn that she saw a man standing, 30, 40 feet away behind a tree. And she kind of did a double take and was staring at him. It's, it's broad daylight, it's the morning, and they're near a trail. So it isn't like unbelievable that there might be someone near her at that very moment. But she kind of did a double take and she looked at them again, and the
Fine here in WA. That's good. That's good to hear. I'm good. How are you? I'm good. Thank you. Good to hear that you guys are good.
this person was gone. And she stood there for a minute, just kind of looking in the direction of where she had seen this guy, wondering, Is my mind playing tricks on me? Did I really see someone there? You know, why aren't they showing themselves again? If there was someone there, they clearly must have just been looking at me. Why aren't they, you know, poking their heads out again to communicate with me
Nice, Monster. What do you play?
in some way? We're out in the middle of nowhere. We should be talking to each other. But the guy never shows himself again. And so as she's standing there wondering what she should do, she isn't ready to yell out to this person because there's part of her that's a little bit nervous about yelling out to some stranger in the middle of the woods. But she starts to get this really intense feeling that she's being watched. And it feels an awful lot like the sense of dread she had while she was in the tent. And she's starting to wonder, you know, are my instincts or is my sixth sense picking up that I'm being watched? Like there's some predator out there looking at me right now? And even though she has no way of knowing if that's actually true, she's alone in the middle of the woods. And even though she's experienced, she can't help but feel really vulnerable. And because this guy
Never ignore your sixth sense. League and Valorant. Oh, okay. Nice. Never played Valorant, but yeah. Nice. Who do you like to play? I know that there's like different characters.
is just not showing himself again, she feels a little bit threatened. And so she begins to panic and she starts packing up all of her stuff as quickly as she can. And as soon as she can, she takes off down the trail away from that guy she saw in the woods. As she was walking down this trail, she couldn't help but think someone was right behind her. And she kept turning around to see if this person or whoever it was behind her, and no one was ever there. But this visceral feeling that she was being watched, that sense of dread she had, it just was not going away. And so she started walking faster and faster. Before long, she was running, and she's realizing that she's in a section of the Appalachian Trail that's very remote. She's not near civilization. She's not near her next rendezvous point. And so she's thinking to herself, I need to get off this trail. I need to get to a road. I need to get away from here as soon as I possibly can. And so her options were to continue on this trail for several miles, and it would probably take her until well into the night before she was going to reach civilization. Or she could take a shortcut because she believed there was a road that was running parallel to her trail, but it was way down the mountain. It would require leaving the
That's cool, Monster. It's always cool to play friends. I've only been playing Apex, but or Genshin. Have you ever played Apex?
trail and basically cutting through the wilderness to get down to this road. But she was pretty confident it was right down there. And because this threat of this person or thing following her was so intense for her, she decided to leave the trail. She couldn't stand the idea of having to spend another night out in the middle of the woods with this person stalking her. And so she walks up the trail and starts running down the mountain. It wasn't long before she started to hear audible sounds coming from what she believed to be this person that was following her.
Have you eaten? I have actually. Thank you. Have you?
And she would turn around and there'd be no one there. And then she started to walk, you know, trying to listen as she's walking, and she would hear footsteps far away from her and she'd turn.
Right? I would never. That's too scary. What's a yaoi?
And there'd be nobody there, but she was certain someone was following her, someone was stalking her. And the sounds that were coming out of this person, this animal, whatever it was, they sounded like, you know, a deep male voice, but you couldn't recognize if it was a language of some kind. It just sounded more like a grunt or a yell of some kind. And so her heart rate's elevated, she's panicking, and she's walking as fast as she can just through the middle of the wilderness, hoping she's walking towards this road. But after walking and running for miles into the middle of nowhere, she has not come to a road. It's now completely dark out, and she knows she's lost.
Oh,
so she
no.
has to set up camp in the middle of nowhere, and she knows somewhere out in the middle of the woods is some person or something that is stalking me. And she's all alone. She has no way to contact anyone. She doesn't have a cell phone. It's 1989. And so she sets up her campsite and she gets in her tent. She zips it up and she lays there hoping she doesn't hear any sounds. And sure enough, within minutes of being inside of that tent, she starts hearing those audible sounds coming from somewhere in the forest. And she hears what sounds like heavy footsteps.
She did. Yeah, but VR games or Battle Royale games kind of bore me quick because none of my friends play them. Oh, okay, I see. Everest, hello, how are you? I'm working, so I'll lurk around, have fun. Thank you, Everest. Thank you for the lurk. Yowie equals Bigfoot. Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, I think I don't know. I think there's something out there because this doesn't make sense.
Walking around the perimeter of her campsite
There's a lot of
all night long.
animals
She
in
hears
Australia,
this.
though.
But luckily, they don't come up right to her tent. So there's some separation between her and whatever is making these sounds. And then finally, the sun comes up. She is out of that tent, packs it up, and continues running in the direction she hopes is the road. And of course, all day long, she has that sense that someone is watching her. She's hearing footsteps coming from behind her. She would turn, she doesn't see anything. She would hear that audible grunting sound, that low voice coming from somewhere behind her. But again, she would never see whoever it was or whatever it was that was making the sound. And then again, the sun is starting to set and she has not found the road. She hasn't found a trail. And she's thinking to herself, I can't even backtrack because if I turn around and start walking backwards, I'm bound to run into this very thing I'm trying to escape. And so once again, she sets up her campsite in the middle of nowhere. She gets inside.
I did one today. Well, it was Loop Station. Which was Robin versus Kristoff. That was a really good one.
And as soon as she's laying in her tent, she starts hearing those heavy footsteps somewhere out in the woods, kind of walking around the perimeter of her campsite. She's hearing that low, audible sound that she can't quite place. And at some point she falls asleep. She gets up the next morning. She jumps out of her tent, packs it up, and starts running, hopefully in the direction that will bring her to civilization. A couple days later, when Eloise was supposed to meet her friend on the trail at the 7-day mark and they were gonna finish the hike together, well, Eloise doesn't show up. But after several hours, when Eloise did not show up,
that's paranoia. I think there was actually something chasing her, but I don't know, like, why wouldn't it just get her? It probably could have caught up to her already, but
her friend left the trail and contacted authorities and filed a missing person report. And the police would launch this massive search for Eloise along the stretch of the Appalachian Trail where she had said she would be. And for the next 14 days, hundreds of police and volunteers and helicopters are scouring this area, and there's no sign of Eloise. And so after 14 days from the time her friend filed the missing person report, the police had to turn the search off and they say, look, we can't find her. 2 days after the search was terminated, so 23 days after Eloise had initially set off for her trek through the Appalachian Trail, a hunter that was out in the middle of nowhere near the Appalachian Trail discovers Eloise perched up against a tree. She's totally emaciated, she's dehydrated, she's delirious, but she's alive. At first, she was terrified of the hunter because she believed the hunter was this person that had been following her. But when she realized he was there to help, she went with him. She was brought back and brought to a hospital, and she was checked out. And besides being dehydrated and, emaciated, she was okay. And she would detail in multiple interviews and in her official statement that she had been chased for the past almost 3 weeks in the middle of the woods, and she doesn't know who it was or why they were chasing her. And then interestingly, she said right before she was found, so a couple of days before this hunter finds her, this person, this thing, whatever it was that was following her, got so close to her a couple different times that she was so scared she ditched her backpack that contained all of her life-saving equipment, like her sleeping bag and her tent, and it had some food and water in there. She ditched that so she could be lighter, so she could run faster away from this thing that is chasing her in the woods. So you gotta figure, you gotta be at such a high level of fear that you're prepared to ditch the one thing you really require to survive out in the wilderness, which was her pack full of supplies. And then after she's ditched her pack and she's run for some distance, she's got no supplies, no food, no water, she stumbles across this tree in the middle of nowhere that wedged inside the trunk is a cache of donuts and pound cake. And so she takes the donuts and pound cake, and between that and the stream water she had found, that's what kept her alive for the last few days before.
Just some random cake in the woods. What? I would not eat that. I've been camping once with friends, and it was really scary because one other person was camping near and he kind of looked creepy and like a biker, but we woke up alive, so he was a good dude, I guess. I guess so. Funny. That's That's a witch cake. Maybe. Days, how are you? That can't be true. What if she thought it was cake, but it was like something else? I don't know. Crazy stuff, SpongeBob. Gifted, hello, hello. Vexen, hello, how are you? How's everybody? We were just watching. This girl got lost for like 3 weeks. And she found some random cake in the middle of the forest. Pound cake, apparently.
Where she was found. Eloise says she has no idea what to make of her experience, and law enforcement were baffled by it as well. Some people think Eloise had a mental break, and she effectively made this whole situation up. That she really was lost in the woods, but no one was chasing her, and she was just kind of paranoid and running around the wilderness for a couple of weeks. Other people, including park rangers that work that stretch of the Appalachian Trail, believe it's possible she could have been stalked by wild men, which are basically people that live out in the mountains that are effectively feral, that live off the land, and they've been known, according to local legend, they've been known to attack park rangers, and people that live out in that area have claimed to have seen these wild men, and they kind of match the description of what she was describing. But as of right now, there's no official explanation for what happened to her other than she got lost and was found again.
Sadly, I can't.
On June 7th, 1951,
I have to sleep, but I wanted to stop and say hi. It's almost 11:30 p.m. Oh no, why Vexen? I'm sorry. I was gonna stream earlier, but Vexen says hi. He says hello. Oh, he saw. Okay. Well, thank you for coming by, Vexen. I hope you have a good night. Thank you, thank you. Have a great day tomorrow.
Families from Santa Fe, New Mexico met up at the Santa Fe ski basin to have a picnic together and to enjoy the mountain air. During the summer months when there's no snow on the ground, the Santa Fe ski basin is a very popular location for hikers because the terrain is very rugged, and if you get up to the top of the basin, there's these incredible views overlooking the valley. But on this day, the two families decided they wanted to have a picnic at the base of the basin, basically looking up the mountain. As the parents were setting up the picnic site, the kids started playing together, and that was Larry and Janet McGee, who were brother and sister aged 7 and 5 respectively, and Stephen Cross, who was 3 years old. After they finished setting up their picnic...
Sorry, Vexen. It's good that you go to sleep pretty kind of early, because then, you know, you won't be so tired tomorrow. Hello, Vexen, and goodbye. Hopefully next time you can stay longer. A wild man thought they were dating and left the cake to make her happy. Maybe. No, that makes sense.
Site, they look around and realize the kids are gone, and they're thinking, we just saw them like 2 minutes ago, so they can't have gone very far. And so they start looking around for their kids, and they can't find them. They're yelling out for them, and they're starting to get a little bit more worried, and they start branching out farther and farther, and they realize the only other place they could have gone is up into the woods, which are very steep and very rugged. So they're thinking, well, they can't have gone into the mountains. That would be impossible for these young kids to get very far, and they aren't responding to our calls. It's possible they could have been abducted. And so one of the parents ran down to the main building of the actual ski resort where they kept a staff member in there during the summer months, and they were able to get inside and use a phone, and they called authorities. So the police come out and they set up these huge spotlights that are aimed up at the mountain. And so the idea was, if the kids did get up into the mountain somehow, they would see these lights and hopefully walk down to them. After they set up the spotlights, the police began combing the side of the mountain in hopes that the kids were not abducted. But despite the spotlights and hundreds of searchers and people yelling out for these kids, they never heard back from the kids. They didn't find them. And so all night they're looking for them, and they're realizing that there's a pretty good chance they're probably not here, and that means they probably were abducted. And so by the following afternoon, things were really starting to look grim. There was no sign of these kids anywhere. And that's when a searcher who was way outside of the primary search area, they were about 3.5 miles away, thousands of feet up in elevation. They're up there and they're looking around and they're getting ready to leave when they see something out of the corner of their eye that looks like a person. They turn around and one of the kids is poking their head up from behind a log. And the searchers run over to them, and sure enough, the 3 kids were actually inside of this downed log, and they were all okay. As the searchers are picking them up and calling this in, they're thinking to themselves,
What's the name?
how in the world did these kids get so far away? Once the children were brought back down to the search headquarters and were reunited with their parents and were checked out by a doctor who said, yep, they're a little dehydrated, but they're okay. After all that was done, the police asked them the question that everybody was thinking: how did you get where you were found? And Larry, the oldest of the group, he was 7 years old. It took him a minute, but eventually he said, they were playing around the picnic area and they went just barely into the tree line when all of a sudden a bear came out from behind a tree and began chasing them. And the 3 of them ran 3.5 miles up a mountain to find this log, which they jumped inside of, and they hid inside of this log from this bear, which apparently was patrolling the area looking for them. And in addition to this bear that was apparently walking around the area looking for them, Larry said they were especially scared of the gorilla that was walking around the area looking for them as well. Now, it's easy to discount Larry and the kid's story because you could say, okay, well, the gorilla they saw was actually just a searcher looking for them, except there was no one in that.
Why would you call a person a gorilla? And it's not like kids are like dumb.
Area looking for the kids near that log until right before they were found. It was kind of like a last-ditch effort to push outside the boundaries of the main search area. It was just kind of a miracle.
They're true stories, but these are kids, so I guess they don't really know how to describe what they saw, but
actually located them. And Larry and the kids were saying this gorilla and this bear were looking for them on the first day and first night they were out there. So there were no searchers out there at that time. As for the bear, there have been bear sightings in the Santa Fe ski basin, although it is fairly rare. But if it was a bear that was chasing these kids, it would have caught them. A bear is not gonna not be able to catch 3 small children running uphill. So either there wasn't a bear, or it was some other animal that might have resembled a bear. But what type of an animal would chase 3 small children who are very vulnerable 3.5 miles up a mountain only to abandon them? But even if we say, you know what, there's no way the bear and the gorilla had anything to do with this, this is just kids who got lost and they wound up in the woods and they were found, and that's it. Fine, but I have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I can tell you right now, there's no way they could cover a 3.5 mile distance uphill in really rugged mountainous terrain in a 24-hour cycle. There's no way. Without help, that's not possible. I would say the only caveat to that would be if my children
he was thick if he looked like a gorilla. Right. Damn, I'm trying really hard to believe it. The first one sounded really unbelievable, but these kids are just trying to explain what they saw. But you never know, He was a Yowie wanting to join in game of hide and seek, right? Probably. But is it like blind or something that I can't see that the kids were in the log?
Were fearful for their lives, in which case adrenaline would kick in and they probably could cover that distance in a 24-hour period. That certainly lends credibility to the idea that Larry, Janet, and Steve were in fact running for their lives, and they had that adrenaline kick, and that's how they were able to cover that distance. But were they really running from a bear or a gorilla? We don't know, and there's been no further investigation into this case, and I think that's because the kids were found alive. The parents, the police, they're happy, and everybody moved on.
I think they
From
should
2002 to 2006, Cullen Finnerty was perhaps the most successful college quarterback in history, winning 3 national championships and being named the Division II Player of the Decade. He was also perhaps the toughest college quarterback in history. Most quarterbacks will spend their careers looking to avoid getting smashed by defenders. Not Cullen. Cullen was 6'2", 240 pounds, and he would tell his teammates that he wanted to get hit, and he would hit back. And his coaches hated it about him, but his teammates loved this about him. Cullen was also famous for playing through injuries. His junior year in college, he broke his collarbone, and he didn't tell anyone, and he played through an entire playoff series that he won. After college, Cullen's professional
gosh.
football career was not nearly as successful as his amateur one. He played briefly for two NFL football teams, the Baltimore Ravens and the Denver Broncos, but when he wasn't getting any playing time and he just could see the writing on the wall that this was not going to be a match, he was not going to make it in the NFL, he left for Europe to play in a European football league. But when his European football career started to sputter out as well around 2009, he came back to the United States where he joined a very small-time indoor arena football league. And while Cullen's love of football was still there as much as it ever was, he knew at this point, playing at this low of a level, that his career was effectively over. Around the same time that Cullen was hanging up his football cleats, he would meet Jennifer, who would become his wife.
And Bear would sniff him out. Yeah, he just wants to play. Alright. That's true. Fedora! Hello, how are you? Wondering where you were.
She was an all-state volleyball player and in many ways was just as competitive and as athletic as Cullen was. They were kind of like a perfect match for each other. They married in 2010, and Cullen, this big man, big-time quarterback, was shaking and crying at the altar because he was so nervous and excited about marrying Jennifer. Because I think this was a really big turning point for him, where he was basically putting football in the past and starting this new life and building a family with Jennifer, and he was really excited about it. The newlywed couple moved into a house together in Michigan where they had 2 kids, and Cullen landed a good job in medical sales, and by all accounts, Cullen was just hitting his stride post-football. On Memorial Day weekend in 2013, Jennifer's family was planning this 3-day fishing trip along the Baldwin River in Michigan, and the Finnertys decided they would join them. And so Cullen and his wife and kids, they rented a cabin that was going to be near the campsite that Jennifer's family was staying at, and for the entire weekend, it was just this great fishing trip where
I'm good, thank you. Happy you're doing good too. I'm ready for some spooky time. Yeah. These stories are crazy. Like, there's so many people that go missing in the woods, but thankfully these 2 first stories, they were found. But let's see about this one.
Everybody had a great time and the weather was beautiful. And on May 26th, so the last night of this 3-day fishing trip, Cullen, who had recently purchased this pontoon boat that they had used for this fishing trip, he wanted to just go out one more time on his boat, this boat that he was really proud of, and fish for another 30-45 minutes before ending the weekend. So Cullen put on his waders and his jacket, he grabbed his fishing pole, and he had his family drive him to the stairs that led down to the water where his pontoon boat was. Before he walked down the steps, he turned and told his family that he'd be out for about 30 to 45 minutes and that he wanted to be picked up at the next boat ramp down the way and that he would call when he needed a ride. 42 minutes later at 9:27 p.m., Jennifer receives a phone call from her husband, and she's expecting it to be the call where he says, okay, I'm ready to get picked up. But when she answers the phone, Cullen is frantic, and he's telling her that he's being followed by 2 men in the tree line, that he's out on the water on his pontoon, but there are 2 men in the tree line that he can't see, but he can hear them, and they've been following him for some time. And before Jennifer can even get a word out, Cullen says to her that he's going to beach the boat and take his clothes off, and then he hangs up.
What? Why would he take his clothes off? There's 2 people following me, so I'm gonna take off my clothes. I gotta remember to watch this because I think I missed most of it. Sorry, Fedora. Indeed. Gabster's not gonna believe anything now. Well then.
Jennifer immediately tries calling Cullen back repeatedly, but he's not picking up, and so she's left feeling totally confused about what her husband has just told her. But what stood out to her was how scared he sounded on the phone. And fear was not something she typically associated with Cullen. This beast of a man, this tough football player, he didn't get scared. So for him to be that scared sounding and to be describing people basically stalking him, she knew he was in serious trouble. So she calls 911 and she describes
9:40 p.m. would be already dark, so
describes where he is in the Baldwin River, and the police take her report and say, we'll send someone out right away. After Jennifer got off the phone with police, she called her family and told them about this really strange phone call from Cullen and how she had just called the police and she didn't know what to do. And so her brother tried calling Cullen and Cullen answered. And when he did, Matt said, hey, Cullen, where are you? And Cullen would say, I don't know where I am, but there's these 2 guys that are still following me. And Matt would say, are you still on your boat? Are you on land? And all Cullen said is, it's getting pretty rough out here. And then he hung up. Afterwards, Matt would
He likes being followed. I don't think so. Don't apologize. It's all good. I'm intrigued from the rest of this. Horror stories throw common sense out the window. These are true stories though, but this has happened to people like in the missing 401 cases that for some reason they take off their clothes. Don't know why. Let's see what he says, I guess. It's not that spoopy of a time for me. The sun's coming out. It's 6:30 a.m. Have you gone to sleep? 6:30 a.m. What? Crazy. Where are you, monster?
Would call Jen and he would tell her about this phone call with Cullen, and it really didn't add any clarity to the situation. And so Jen and her family decide the best thing they can do is go to the boat ramp where Cullen had said he wanted to be picked up in hopes that maybe he would make his way there and they would find him. So Jennifer and her family head out to this location and Cullen's not there. They get out, they're yelling for him. There's no sign of him, and shortly after, a police car would show up because this was one of the areas where Jennifer had said when she spoke to police that Cullen might be. And so the police officer gets out, they take an official statement from Jennifer, and at this point they file an official missing person report. Before the police began looking for Cullen, they reached out to his wireless service provider and they asked them to ping his cell phone from the tower. Any service provider has the ability to roughly triangulate the location of a cell phone based on the last few locations of the phone. The last 4 locations that the service provider pinged for Cullen were up to
Yeah, they're two stories. No.
4 miles apart from each other, which was
Why, monster? Why? Saw the comment you sent me on Dashi's video at 5 a.m. so I waited you to go live. What? Are you serious? I'm sorry. I was gonna stream earlier, but then I guess you wouldn't have seen it, but you should go to sleep. Sleep is not needed. Sleep is needed. I sleep too much.
bizarre in its own way, because the idea that in a very rugged, rough area in a very short amount of time that Cullen had been moving 4, 5, 6, 7 miles just to get to these different points, that didn't really make sense.
I think I don't know if you guys like know about like, but anyway. So, I think in these situations something happens that they end up in like Narnia kind of thing, like in a different dimension. And so that's kind of how they end up like miles away when they were just like walking, and it's happened so many times. So
But also, when they looked at these points on a map, it looked like each of them was either near a paved road, or in order to get to them, you would have had to cross a paved road. And so they're thinking to themselves, why does he keep moving point to point if at any one of these locations he's near relative safety? But as strange as these 4 locations were, the police now had a really solid starting point. So they dispatched people to each of these points, and they began combing along the river where he had last been seen. And within an hour, they discovered his boat. It was a little ways down from where he had been dropped off. It was missing an oar, and it was basically beached on the side of the river. It wasn't clear if it had been intentionally beached, but Cullen wasn't in it, and when they searched around the area, they couldn't find any sign that Cullen was in the area. They were yelling for him. He wasn't yelling back.
you should have just stayed on the lake. Don't apologize. I like your content. That's why I'm here. Thank you, monster. Thank you, thank you. Next time I'm being followed, I'll make sure to go to Narnia. I mean, they don't go there on purpose. Ah, gosh. BG's creates. Hello, hello, how are you? You guys are funny.
Interestingly, a man who owned property near where the pontoon boat was found reported to police hearing screaming or yelling coming from the area where the boat was found around the same time that Cullen went missing. But despite this piece of information, it didn't actually help them discover where Cullen actually went. For the next 48 hours, police and hundreds of people searched in the areas where his cell phone had pinged and along the river where his pontoon had been found, but there was no sign of him. Then on the evening of May 28th, approximately 48 hours after Cullen had gone missing, they discovered his body. It was located less than a half mile away from a paved road, and it was situated in between those 4 points that the cell phone provider had given.
Oh no. I thought he was gonna survive.
He was laying completely face down with his right arm under his body and his left arm over his head, clutching some grass. When they rolled him over, he had some blood coming out of his nose, but besides that, there was no significant trauma anywhere on his body. Cullen appeared to be wearing all of his clothes. However, it was noted that the strap on his waders was really badly twisted. Now, if he had never taken his clothes off, that would have been something he would have fixed. It would have been very uncomfortable when he started this trip to go fishing. That would have been something he would have fixed. Now, he said to his wife on the phone that he was going to be taking his clothes off, which there was no explanation for that, but he clearly said that to his wife, and she reported that to police. And so some have speculated that between that phone call and finding him with the twisted strap on his waders, that indicates that perhaps his clothes did come off at some point over the past couple of days and were put back on again, either by him or by someone else. His cell phone had also been found in his front pocket, indicating that those cell phone pings had been his actual location. Initially, Cullen's autopsy was completely inconclusive. There was no trauma to his body, there was no obvious thing that killed him. But later on, it was determined he died of pneumonia caused by inhaling his own vomit. So we don't know how you get to a place where you're inhaling your own vomit, but I would imagine you're in a pretty panicked state of mind if that could happen to you. Many people believe Cullen's death was the result of a traumatic brain injury caused by all the years of playing football and getting hit in the head. And so that can lead to paranoia. And so perhaps this was a fit of paranoia. He got turned around, he got scared, he thought somebody was chasing him. And then, he vomits and inhales his vomit, and that ultimately kills him. And in 2011, Cullen had briefly shown signs of being a little bit paranoid when one day he thought someone was following him, and he actually went to a family member's house and said, "I think someone's following me," but he could never identify where this person was or who they were. But even if this was a fit of paranoia and no one was following him in the woods, well, why didn't he stop on the paved road every time he crossed it? Because that would have represented safety. I mean, in 2011, when he supposedly had another fit of paranoia, his instincts were to go to a family member and to seek help. And so you would think his instincts in this situation would be similar. He would seek help, he would seek safety, but he continuously left safety. He left the road. He left his boat. His boat was safety. Why did he leave his boat?
I know.
And even if we turn this around and we say, no, it was not a fit of paranoia, that he was in fact being followed by someone or something in the woods, well, then why would that prompt him to call his wife and say, "I'm going to get out of the boat and take my clothes off," and then proceed to walk 4, 5, 6, 7 miles in a very short period of time, crossing over a paved road at least 1 or 2 times and not stopping, not signaling for help? That doesn't make sense either. And what was that screaming that resident heard coming from the area where the pontoon boat was found? Unfortunately, there are many questions in this case, and the vast majority of them will go unanswered. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret and
That sucks. Bryce, hello, how are you? Rip, I know. Why not stay in the boat with a phone to call people? I know. I don't know. By the way, I forgot to mention that I got affiliate 2 days ago on Twitch. I'm taking a hiatus from Twitch right now, but I'm stoked to come back after I'm done with the hiatus. That's cool, Everest. Congrats. Congrats, congrats. For sure. I gagged a bit. So due to panic, he couldn't regurgitate, I guess. I don't know, but that sucks for him. Paranoia is in the house again. Maybe bipolar. I don't think so. It's just these things happen when people are in the. I don't know if you guys have heard. He has so many of these stories, the missing 401. And like so many people go to the forest and then they get a little crazy. Like they think that somebody's following them, or they start doing things that don't make sense, like taking off their clothes, and like it just doesn't make sense, and it only happens in the woods, and before that they never really have any problems, so it's weird. Damn, I only heard 25% of it. That's why. We're gonna watch some more, but that sucks. I really like. Oh my god! If you did you guys see this one? It was terrible. Be like, oops, like 15. Let's do 18.
Every year,
I actually did Everest. He was during a stream too, and they like copy striked my video, so I don't think I can do it. I don't know why they do that. Like, just copyright it. Why do you have to copy strike it? Yay, more spoopy. Time to grab the popcorn. The popcorn, guys. Next. My coffee at 9:30. Darn it. I know. Sorry. If it's the same one, I'm not sure if it's the same one, but
hundreds of people go missing under baffling conditions
well,
in the woods of North America. I'm talking about people that are right in front of someone and then in an instant they're just gone and they're never found again. Or in some cases they are found again, but they're in places that are impossible to access. One former police detective named David Paulides has investigated thousands of these strange disappearances, and he documents what he finds in his incredible book series called Missing 411. Today, we're going to look at 3 of his strangest Missing 411 cases. But before we get into today's stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right channel, because that's all we do, and we upload 3, 4, even 5 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please give the like button VIP access to the Kingda Ka roller coaster at Six Flags Great Adventure, New Jersey. And once the like button gets to the top of the ride, go ahead and manually turn off the ride and then close the park. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories.
do you guys like roller coasters? It's David Paulides. In some cases. I was already getting sleepy, so I kind of had to.
On May 21st, 1941, Betty Albright and her 3-year-old son, Eldridge, traveled to her mother's house in rural Woodstock, Maryland. Betty had asked her mother if she would look after her son for the afternoon so Betty could catch up on some much-needed sleep. They arrived at Betty's mother's house at about 1:30, and right away Betty went inside, handed her son to her mom, and went upstairs to take a nap. As for Eldridge and his grandmother, they went out in the backyard to play. Now, Eldridge loved going to his granny's house because she had this enormous backyard for him to play in. If you were standing on her back porch looking out, it would be 250 meters of just open grass for him to run around in, and it butted up against this huge forest. And in the middle of her property, looking straight out at the forest, there was this 3-meter gap in the trees that if you walked through it, it would bring you down to this creek bed that was seasonal, and there was very rarely any water running through it. From the porch, anyone that was standing in this creek bed, you could clearly see. And so Eldridge was allowed to play in the creek bed, so long as he did.
Roller coasters are fun. Hell yeah, roller coasters are amazing. Which roller coasters have you guys been on? I've been on the ones in Six Flags, which are the biggest I think I've been on so far.
Didn't go right or left in the creek, which would put him out of view from anybody on the porch. And so this particular day, when Eldridge and his grandmother went outside, Eldridge wanted to go play in the creek bed, so he immediately starts running across the yard towards it, along with his grandmother's 3 dogs. As for his grandmother, she just didn't have it in her to go all the way down to the creek bed, so she decided she would just sit on the porch and read a book and keep her eye on Eldridge.
Oh, no.
She remembers watching her grandson go all the way across the yard, get to the break in the trees, and then step down into the creek bed, where he began goofing around with the dogs and throwing rocks and having a good time, clearly in view. And for the next 5-10 minutes, she just stared directly at her grandson and the dogs. And at some point, she picked up the book next to her and she began reading the book and then periodically looking up to check on her grandson and then back down to the book. At about 2 p.m., she was looking down at her book when she heard her grandson yell out for help. Now, 3-year-olds yell out for help all the time. Sometimes it's a big deal and sometimes it's not such a big deal. But oftentimes the sound of their voice gives away how serious it is. No matter what they say, it's like their tone gives away, should I take this seriously or is this just a kid being a 3-year-old? And she would say that the way he was yelling sounded like a real emergency. When she poked her head up, even though she had seen him, less than a minute ago playing in the gap in the trees, now she's looking and he and the dogs are gone. And so, of course, she's alarmed.
No.
She hops out of her seat, she goes down the steps, and she starts walking across the yard towards Eldridge. And she's yelling his name and she's walking
girl from The
quickly.
Walking
When she
Dead.
got about halfway across the yard, she heard Eldridge yell out again. Except this time, his voice was coming from way off in the forest, way farther away from the last time he had yelled out. It gave the impression to her that he had moved a great distance from the last time he yelled to her. And it triggered something inside of her that was telling her something is terribly wrong. And she began running towards the creek bed. Still no sign of the dogs. She can't see anything. She's just running towards the creek bed. When she gets about 10 meters away from the break in the trees, she hears her grandson yell out for a third time, barely audible, way off in the forest. He yells out for help, and as he's yelling, it sounds like someone has stifled him and covered his mouth mid-yell. So she runs through the break in the trees down to the creek bed where she stops, and she looks out in front of her, and it's just dense forest, and there's no Eldridge, there's no dogs, there's nothing. She looks to her right down the creek bed, and there's nothing down there, and then she looks to her left, and one of her dogs is in the creek bed, maybe 10 meters away, facing away from her, and the dog is positioned in such a way that it's clearly looking at something. And so she runs down to the dog, thinking she's going to see maybe Eldridge or the other dogs, but there's nothing beyond the dog. The dog is just rooted to the spot. Its hair is raised, it's growling, and it's taking little steps back, like it's been spooked at whatever it's seen or whatever it's looking at. And she just looked up and tried to look in the direction the dog was looking, but there was nothing. It was just forest. And so at this point, she felt certain that someone must have abducted Eldridge. And so she turns, she tries to pull the dog to come with her, but the dog's not budging. And so she runs back to the house to wake up Eldridge's mother. The two of them come back down to the creek bed. The dog is still in the same position, growling and staring in the same direction, as if whatever it's looking at hasn't gone anywhere.
Crazy stuff. Same, I've been on Six Flags and most amusement parks, roller coasters. Oh, really? All the ones in Canada's Wonderland. That sounds cool. I suffer from extreme motion sickness, so no roller coasters for me. Oh no. Gifted's the same. He's not very good with the motion sickness. But he can still go on roller coasters, I think. Six Flags looks amazing. It's pretty cool. Some of the rides are really good. Plus, I had PTSD from riding one, so oh no, why? What happened? Gives the chills. I know. And another thing that seems to be like they're like invisible. Like whatever it is that's taking, especially kids. Like it's really weird. I don't know what the heck is going on, but don't take your kids to the forest. Apparently, they get taken. Okay, Erickson, thank you so much. Have a good night or day. Yeah, motion sickness is terrible. No.
And they look for a couple more minutes. They're yelling for Eldridge, and the grandmother is telling her daughter, look, I think he's been abducted. We gotta call the authorities. And finally, she relents, and so they do manage to get the dog. They run back to the house, and they call the police. Shortly thereafter, the state police showed up with this huge contingent of searchers, and they immediately went down to the creek bed, where they started pushing predominantly to the left side, which is where the dog was angled, and it was also where the grandmother had heard her grandson yelling from. And very quickly, police discover some of Eldridge's footprints about 50 meters down on the left side of the creek bed. They were in some sand right at the edge, and they were walking away as if he was leaving the area he had been told to stay in, which was in that gap in the trees. But interestingly, the footprints, it looked like he had been walking for maybe 20 or 30 meters when inexplicably the prints just stopped, as if he stopped in the sand where he was. But had he gone right, left, straight, turned around, had he gone in any direction, there would have been additional prints in the sand, but there wasn't, which gave the impression that was where someone must have lifted him up and kidnapped him. But they never found any prints connected to a kidnapper. For the rest of the day and that night, they would not find any more signs of Eldridge or the other two missing dogs. The next day, about 24 hours after Eldridge had gone missing, there were a number of search crews that had gone well outside of the primary search area in hopes of maybe finding one of the two lost dogs, because they thought maybe they could bring them to the lost child. And this one crew that was 4 miles away from where Eldridge had gone missing, they were walking past a swamp when one of them heard what sounded like a child whimpering, and it was coming from inside the swamp. And so immediately they turn and start walking into the swamp, which had fairly deep water, and they get to this clearing and they see there's this rocky overhang with high grass all around it, kind of forming like a cave. And they hear this whimpering again, and it's coming from underneath that rock. And they rush over and they're pulling the grass aside, and sure enough, tucked underneath this rock, inside of this kind of makeshift cave, is Eldridge. He was laying on this really well-constructed bed of leaves that looked like an animal's den. So either Eldridge had found an animal's den, or he had built himself this beautiful bed of leaves. When they approached him, he was sleeping underneath this rock, and so that whimpering sound he was making, he must have been making in his sleep. And so as they got closer to him, he woke up and he kind of sat up, and he's very groggy and confused. You know, all of his clothes were really badly torn up, and he wasn't wearing any shoes, but he overall seemed okay. He just was very confused seeming. And so they scooped him up and they brought him back to search headquarters, reunited him with his mother and his grandmother, and everyone's just so relieved that he's alive. But at the same time, people were like, how did he get 4 miles away in the middle of a swamp? And so after the doctor cleared him, saying he was okay, besides some scratches and bruises, the police...
Oh, I heard about this. It wasn't a huge roller coaster, but there was a sudden shift of the ride when it descended, and my brain wasn't ready for the sudden jerking. After I got off the ride, my body felt numb from the trauma. Oh no. That sucks. Yeah, sometimes like that, like sudden movement, like can really hurt you. Wow. Yeah. Poor child, I know, for him.
Along with the mother and the grandmother, sat down with Eldridge and asked him, you know, what happened? But unfortunately, Eldridge appeared to not know this had even happened. He didn't even know he had spent 24 hours out in the middle of the woods by himself. It was like he had blacked the whole thing out. Because Eldridge was found alive and unharmed, the police did not continue to investigate this case. And so we don't know what caused him to suddenly be yelling for help and appear to be drifting farther and farther into the woods. We don't know what the dog saw in the creek that scared it so badly. We don't know how Eldridge moved 4 miles through a dense forest over multiple swamps, only to wind up in yet another swamp inside of a cave. Although the police came out and said Eldridge must have just wandered off on his own, basically everybody involved in this case believes someone or something abducted him. It's just very fortunate he was found alive. Unfortunately, there's no clarification about what happened to the other two dogs, although the way it's worded in the story, it does sound like they were never found.
Oh no, doggy.
In the 1950s, the Thorpe family lived in Dunbar,
okay.
Pennsylvania, which was a small town of less than 1,000 people. Their house was on a very quiet street with very few neighbors anywhere near them, and their property was right up against this forest that was right in their backyard. Their daughter, 2 years...
That's true, monster. I like, sometimes when it has those things on the side, it bumps your head a lot. So, yeah.
Year-old Anna loved to play in their backyard, but she was instructed to stay on the grass section of their backyard and not venture into the forest because the forest was snake infested. And Anna was terrified of snakes, and so she happily obliged. On May 5th, 1950, Anna was playing in her backyard in that grassy section, and her mother was in the kitchen looking out the back window into the backyard, and her mother looked down for a second when she heard her daughter scream. She looked up and Anna was gone. She immediately ran outside and she's yelling for her daughter. She's looking all around and she knows she must have gone into the forest, and she's thinking to herself, she must have been bit by a snake and she's laying on the ground somewhere. That's why I can't see her. And so she runs into the forest and she's screaming for her daughter and she's not getting any response. She's starting to panic. All her yelling has gotten the attention of her two older sons that were in the house.
Right. True.
They come
Beefed
running
it.
outside and they join the search and they start fanning out and they're looking for Anna, and she's just gone. And so after only a few minutes of looking, Anna's mother decides she has to call the police. The police show up and they launch this massive search, and word got out to the residents of Dunbar that one of their own had gone missing, a child no less. And so virtually everyone in Dunbar showed up to be a part of the search, and they combed that whole forest behind their property, and there was just no sign of Anna. After the first 24 hours had gone by and they had not found any sign of Anna, they decided to expand the search area from a 1 mile radius to a 3 mile radius. And within just hours of this change, there was a crew that was 3 miles away from where Anna had gone missing, and they found Anna, and she was alive. She was laying under this blackberry bush. All she had on was a single shoe. Next to her was a pile of clothes. When they went up to her, she seemed okay. They picked her up and they brought her back to the search headquarters where they reunited her with her parents. A doctor looked at her and the doctor said, there's no signs that she was attacked. There's really no signs of any wear and tear on her at all. It doesn't even look like she was outside for the past 24 hours. When Anna was asked about what happened to her, she wasn't able to give any sort of meaningful answer because she's only 2 years old. But the reason this case is included in today's video is not because, she vanished mysteriously in the forest and that she was actually found 3 miles away versus 1, or, that she was found with just a shoe on. The reason it's included in today's video is because for her to have been found where she was found, the only way for her to have arrived at that spot was if she crossed 10 barbed wire fences. There was no other way for her to have gotten there. The only other way would have been a massive detour that she literally could not have covered. An adult probably couldn't have covered in the amount of time given. So this 2-year-old with no scratches on her body is found on the other side of 10 barbed wire fences. I mean, even if you take the barbed wire off of the fence, a 2-year-old climbing a large fence, that alone is kind of a Herculean task. And to do it without scratching your body, it's not possible. It's truly impossible. A May 7th article in the LA Times said the police were baffled by this 10 fence dilemma, and they said the only way it would make sense is if she had been abducted and dumped there. But the police also repeatedly said there was no evidence to suggest she had been abducted or attacked or harmed in any way. It was just where she was found did not add up. Ultimately, the police came out with a statement saying this had to have been an accident, that Anna, the 2-year-old, managed to just somehow walk her way past all these fences and was found where she was, and thank goodness she's alive. But interestingly, the police confiscated her clothing and would not give that back to the parents, indicating there was further investigation happening even though the child had been found. But unfortunately, the police never revealed whether or not they actually discovered anything else about this case.
Let's keep the clothes and not say anything about it. Okay. Ay. Got out of jail. She got mad hops. She. Hey.
And like in the Eldridge case, Anna's parents did not press for more information about what happened to their daughter because she was found alive and unharmed. Now, Anna's case might seem like some crazy anomaly, and that's all it is. But this is not the first time something like this has happened in this small area.
See, again, she didn't have her clothes.
Area in Pennsylvania.
And why would a 2-year-old? I don't think a 2-year-old could even take off.
2 years earlier, and less than 10 miles away from where Anna went missing, another 2-year-old, Ronald Collier, also went missing in the same stretch of woods. His mother had been sitting with him on their back porch, which overlooked the same forest, and at some point his mother had gone inside, leaving Ronald sitting on one of the seats. When she came back out again, Ronald was gone. His mother estimated that she was inside for maybe 10 or 15 seconds tops. The police and the community came out in force, and they combed through the woods and they could not find any sign of Ronald. And the police got really frustrated with Ronald's parents because they felt like this is impossible. How could this child not turn up considering the timeline you've given us, which is you went inside for 10, 15 seconds and your son is now completely gone. He's completely vanished. Like, you must have something to do with this. And so the police made Ronald's parents take polygraph tests, and his parents passed all of them. The search for Ronald continued for several weeks, but unfortunately it was ultimately terminated and they never found him. People in the area believed someone or something, maybe a bear or some other animal, was lurking in the tree line and watching Ronald. And as soon as his mother went in the house, they ran up and snatched the child and ran away with him. However, the police came out and said there was no evidence.
Why does everybody want a kidnap? I don't know. What are these 2-year-olds doing in the woods? Stay a little. Well, their parents take them there. But, yeah. Long walks will do that. I prefer not to know. I don't know. Like, it's crazy. It's like they become invisible. Like, whatever takes them makes them invisible. I don't know.
Evidence to back up that this child had been kidnapped, that what's far more likely is Ronald just got up and walked away and disappeared. However, 2 years later, when Anna's case happened, these similarities between her case and Ronald's case were just too much for locals to overlook. And so people began saying, you know, it looks like Anna was abducted and placed where she was ultimately found inside of those woods. And so probably whoever or whatever took Anna is the same person or thing that took Ronald. But Anna was just lucky enough to survive. Although this mystery predator theory is just that, a theory, it does seem more likely than Ronald in 15 seconds getting up and running off into oblivion, never to be found again, and Anna scaling 10 barbed wire fences in a 24-hour period without a scratch on her body. Unfortunately, though, we'll probably never know the truth. In September of 2004, 49-year-old Robert Springfield, along with his 2 teenage sons, left their home in Wyoming, bound for the Bighorn Mountains in Montana. They were planning to do some elk hunting on the Crow Reservation, which is the homeland of the Crow tribe, and Robert and his family were members of the Crow Reservation and therefore had the rights to hunt on that land. The specific spot the boys were going to be hunting was Black Canyon, a particularly steep and rugged area. But Robert was well equipped for this type of environment because he had previously served in the United States Marine Corps in their Special Operations.
Fair enough. Yeah, I digress. Not me. It was not me. It was gifted. I'm just kidding. He got too spooked out. Right.
Unit, which would have meant he would have received a very high level of outdoor survival training, which is perfect for living up in the mountains. Robert's sons had apparently learned a lot from him and were very competent outdoorsmen as well. They arrived at the reserve on September 19th and immediately headed out to do some bow and arrow hunting. Their plan was the 2 boys would...
Are you in the Marines, Fedora? No, right. No B-Bucks videos, so someone got mad, probably. Probably. It wasn't me. I'm just kidding. It's because your name is not me.
break off from their father and head over to the edge of the canyon and attempt to drive elk down into the valley so their dad could take a shot at them. But late in the afternoon, the 2 teenage boys had not seen a single elk, and so it was getting to be time to head back to the prearranged meeting spot, and so they packed up their stuff and they headed there. The boys make it to the meeting area, and their father, Robert, is not there. So they sit down and they begin to wait. And an hour goes by, 2 hours goes by, 3 hours goes by, still no sign of their dad. They can't get in touch with him. They have no cell phone service. And so they're thinking to themselves, okay, you know, worst case scenario, he got turned around and he'll have to spend the night out in the cold. But he's got warm winter clothes on. He knows what he's doing. He'll be fine. And so as the sun was setting, the boys did finally leave to go tell authorities that their dad was, you know, lost in Black Canyon somewhere. But it was just not registering for them that this could be life-threatening, that something really bad could have happened to their dad. He was just this Superman figure to them, and it just did not cross their mind. Authorities launch a search that night that includes the use of helicopters with thermal imagers doing low flyovers of the entirety of Black Canyon. Thermal imagers pick up a heat signature, and so anyone that is alive gives off a heat signature. And so at night, if you were flying overhead and you saw a person in the middle of a canyon where there's virtually nothing else around them, they would stand out like a bright light. But that night, the helicopters combed all over Black Canyon and they never saw Robert. However, authorities would say that, this guy, he's trained, former special operator. He probably went and
My mom! Everybody, this is my mom. It's Letty. Hello, how are you?
found shelter. So he could be inside of a cave, or maybe he made himself a shelter with tree branches, and it's obscuring him from the thermal imager, and so we'll just have to look tomorrow. But the next day, despite bringing out hundreds of searchers and bloodhounds and people on horseback and more helicopters and planes flying overhead, there was no sign of Robert. And after several weeks of still not finding any sign of Robert, they ultimately called it off. The family was obviously crushed, but more than that, they were just dumbfounded. The idea that something bad had happened to Invincible Robert, that just didn't add up for them. And so after the official search was terminated, they would continue to make trips into Black Canyon looking for their father, their husband. But unfortunately, like all the searchers, they never found any trace of him and eventually accepted that he was gone. 1 year later, in October of 2005, a hunter who didn't know
Alrighty, Everest, thank you so much. Have a great day. Thank you.
anything about Robert Springfield or the fact that he had disappeared. This hunter is in Black Canyon in the same area where Robert Springfield had disappeared. And this hunter is walking through this really dense forest. He's all alone. He's an experienced hunter, and he's not on a path. He's just kind of combing through the woods, and he starts to hear what sounds like a crow screeching. And at first, it doesn't really register with him. It's only in retrospect that he recalls this sequence of events. As he kept walking on, the screeching intensified to the point where he just could not ignore it. And so he stopped and turned to listen to the screeching crow that he couldn't see through the dense forest, but he could tell it was in that general direction. This hunter said as soon as he stopped and he turned and began actively listening to this crow, he had this weird sensation that the crow was trying to actively communicate with him. It was a very strange experience. He had never had anything like it in his entire hunting career, and he spent lots of time outdoors. And so he felt like he had to go over and see what was going on with this crow. And so he starts walking towards the crow. He still can't see it. It's very thick vegetation, and he's getting closer and closer, and he gets to a place where he can just barely see this crow. It's in a clearing. There is this large tree stump right in the middle of the clearing, and this tree stump is not short. It's like 6, 7, 8 feet high in the air. It looks like this tree had broken in the middle and fallen over, and this crow is sitting on the top of this kind of gnarled stump. And the crow is just incessantly screeching. And from this hunter's perspective, he can see the crow and he's kind of staring at it. And as the hunter is looking at this crow, the crow suddenly turns and looks directly at the hunter. And it recognizes the hunter can see the crow, and the crow stops screeching and is just staring directly at the hunter. And this hunter would say he felt so unsettled by the sudden behavior of the crow, because it was almost like confirming the crow was looking for him, and now he had found him, and he stopped screeching and was looking at him. The bird continued to stare silently at the hunter, to the point where the hunter felt compelled to walk out of the vegetation into the clearing to kind of confront the crow. And so he stepped into the clearing, and the crow the whole time is not screeching anymore, just looking at the hunter. And the hunter's standing in the clearing, and he looks at the crow, and the crow suddenly looks straight down. The hunter follows the crow's gaze down to the ground, and he sees at the base of the tree is a human skull. And the hunter's so taken aback by this, he looks back up at the crow, who's looking at him again, and the whole situation is so terrifying to this hunter that he just makes a note of where he is, and he runs. As soon as the hunter got out of the woods and was back in cell phone reception, he called authorities. Authorities showed up, and he showed them on the map where
either that crow is extremely smart, or I don't know, what if it was like the spirit of the guy or something? I don't know. That's crazy. Run. Well, crows are really smart, but it's crazy.
he had discovered this crow and this skull next to a tree. And sure enough, the authorities make their way out and they find the skull right under this tree. The crow at this point is gone. When they walked up to the tree stump, they discovered it was not just a human skull, it was also a human femur bone right next to the skull. And then next to that was a set of boots that had been placed right next to them, neatly next to one another. And then next to that was a belt that had been tightly wound up and placed next to the boots. And then next to that was a jacket that was not folded, but was balled up. And inside of the jacket was a wallet containing cash and Robert Springfield's ID cards. The authorities launched a search.
And this happens too, like when they get found, usually dead, unfortunately, their clothes is like next to them and like they like folded it. It's weird.
In that area to look for the rest of Robert's remains, but unfortunately
Zach, hello, how are you? At least he noped out of there. Right.
they were never recovered. Also, his bow and arrows were never found. The FBI was brought into the case because foul play was suspected, and they eventually determined that Robert must have been shot. And then they later recanted that statement and said, actually, he was hit by a falling tree. But if he was struck by a tree, then where is the rest of him? Wouldn't it have been in that area? And then why were all of his things neatly stacked? Certainly he wouldn't have done that after getting hit by a tree, so who neatly stacked his things after he was hit? And then also, where is his bow and arrows? But despite how improbable it sounds, that is the official theory, that he was hit by a falling tree.
Yes,
the
that makes
family,
sense.
along with many other people, believe he was attacked by someone or something up in those mountains. But if he had been attacked, his sons would have heard the struggle because they were in an area where sound carried really, really well. And if a person attacked him, why didn't they take the money out of his wallet? Also, where Robert's remains had been found was very close to where his original campsite had been with his two sons on the night he had gone missing. And so it was firmly located inside of the initial search grid, meaning had he been under a tree or been left for dead by some attacker in that area, he would have been found in those first couple of weeks that they were looking before the search was terminated. So the fact that he wasn't found means either hundreds of people didn't see him, including a helicopter with thermal imager, or he wasn't there until after the search was terminated. And if so, where was he? And perhaps the weirdest aspect of this entire case is the claim by this hunter that a crow apparently lured him over to this tree stump where he found Robert's remains. If you believe this hunter's story, and many, many people do, then do you really think it's a coincidence that all of this took place on Crow Reservation, home of the Crow tribe? I think not.
That's true.
But will we ever know the truth about what actually happened to Robert? I don't know. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode,
They should just put cameras, like those trail cameras. See what they catch, if they can catch anything or not. The cops are the killers. I think in this case, no, but they definitely do kill people sometimes. Thank you, Zach. Thank you, thank you. It was the FBI that was like, yes, a tree hit him. I think it's just because they couldn't really find any other explanation. Go to sleep, mama. A tree neatly stacked his things. The tree did it. Dang, dude, that's why. I know. Alrighty, we're gonna see one more. Did I see this one? You guys want to see the Bigfoot one?
for it.
Oh, we saw this one. Uh, Did we see this one?
Every year, hundreds of people go missing under baffling conditions inside the woods of North America. I'm talking about people being right in front of someone and then in a second they're gone.
The tree from the Lord of the Rings. Yeah. The ends to it. Do you guys want to see the Bigfoot one?
And they're never.
Sounds a good one.
For at least 2 centuries, people have been claiming to see this tall, hairy, ape-like creature walking around forests all over the world, but mostly in North America. That creature is commonly referred to as Bigfoot. But despite the thousands of sightings that have occurred over the years and the nearly 400 news sightings of this supposed creature every year, there's never been any scientific proof that the creature actually exists. So while the legitimacy of these first-hand accounts is very much up for debate, and probably will be for some time, what's not up for debate is how absolutely terrifying some of these first-hand accounts are. And so what I did is I went out and found 2 of the most frightening encounters with Bigfoot, and I'm going to share those stories on today's video. But before we get into those 2 stories, come to the right channel. I would encourage you to steal the like button's phone and turn off all of their alarms so they're late for work tomorrow. Also, please subscribe to my channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of my weekly uploads. Alright, let's get into today's stories.
Mr. Ballin on Burari, if it interests you. What's that? What's Burari? Ape Canyon.
In July of 1924, Fred Beck, along with 4 other gold prospectors, stumbled out of a forest right near Mount St. Helens in Washington state. And they swore to each other that they would not tell a soul what they had seen in the mountains the night before.
Wait, is this the one? No, it's not. The other one was in Canada.
But literally within a few hours of making that promise to each other, one of the men had spilled the beans at a bar. Very quickly, their story would garner major national media attention and even drew some international attention as well. This is their story. So the week leading up to the men arriving back in town with this crazy story, they had been prospecting for gold in an area they were very accustomed to working in. In fact, for the past 6 years, they had been going.
Jim Can't Swim? Who's that? Super interesting. Alrighty. We can do like two more videos.
To this spot. So it was an area they knew well. And so this particular week that they were out there had been really successful. They had found a whole bunch of gold. It was like this great run of luck and nobody wanted to leave. Unfortunately, one of the men named Fred Beck started complaining of a really bad toothache. Now, they're about 2 miles away from this town. It's very rugged terrain. It's not safe for someone to travel alone in case something were to happen. And so Fred needed one or all of these men to come back with him. None of them wanted to leave, but they were willing to compromise.
You are too kind. We love you too. Hey, thank you. Thank you for always being here. Thank you for being awesome. Thank you, everybody.
And they said, let's stay here today, and then we'll leave first thing tomorrow morning. And so Fred didn't really have much of a choice, and so he agreed, and they spent the rest of the day prospecting for gold. When the sun started to go down, the men decided it was time to pack it in and head to their cabin. Now, because these men had worked in this area for the past 6 years, they had actually built a small log cabin centrally located in this area so they could just crash out there and continue to work and not need to commute out of the town. The cabin, though, was not built for comfort. It was built entirely for practicality. It was barely big enough to sleep all 5 men, and in fact, 2 of them had to sleep in the same bed, like right against one another, and then the other 3 had to sleep on the ground. There were no windows in this cabin. It was like this awful chamber that they were trapped inside of. But it was sturdy, it protected them from the elements, and it was enough because they were out there for work, not for pleasure. So as they're walking towards their tiny little cabin, they get just outside the cabin and notice a very large footprint, like an animal print, outside.
That sounds cool, Gabster. Okay, Zach. I'll see that one after.
The cabin. The men stop, they look down. Now, these are 5 rugged mountain men that are accustomed to being out in the wild. They've had their fair share of
Oh,
run-ins
I think I saw like I didn't see the video, but I think I saw like the thumbnail of it. But we'll see.
with large predators, and so they quickly said, oh, that's a bear print. But upon closer inspection, as they're looking at this print, they noticed it was 19 inches long. That's way too big to be a bear print. And so they start speculating about what type of animal could make that print. As they're speculating, one of the men brings up that over the course of the week when he had been away from the group, a little ways away from the cabin, he had noticed a similar, not nearly as big, but a similar print. And when he had bent down to look at the print and inspect it to see what it was, he said he heard a whistling sound coming from the forest that was right next to him. And so he stood up and he looked, but he didn't see where the whistling was coming from.
Jesus,
and he thought to himself, I don't know what animal makes that sound. So he's looking out, he can't see where the whistling's coming from, and then he hears whistling behind him. The same sound, but on the opposite side of him. And he turns around and he looks.
That's like screaming, not whistling.
And there's nothing over there as well. And he's trying to put together in his head what animal makes that sound. He knows it's not the people he's out there with because they were way over near the cabin and he could actually see them from where he was.
That
and
is
he
quite
starts
a
getting
big
this really
foot,
uneasy
right?
feeling that whatever made this huge print
There's some short
is
ones?
probably
Oh, okay.
in the woods right now watching me, whistling at me. And so he abandons the print and heads back to camp, but was too embarrassed to bring the story up to the group.
Not a
in fear
whistle,
that
I
they
know,
would
right?
think he was exaggerating, so he never brought it up. When this guy tells this story to the group, Fred Beck would say, that's weird, I heard whistling coming from the forest too. I thought it was you guys. They figured they were dealing with a large predator. They decide that it's in their best interest to forego a campfire outside the cabin, which they normally would do at night, and instead just go right inside the cabin and shut the door because they don't know what animals are out here and they want to play it safe. So they're sitting inside their windowless little dark cabin and they start feeling pretty hungry. And they decide they want to boil some water to make food, but they don't have any water. Normally, when any of these guys went out to fetch water, they would go by themselves. The spring was not very far away from their cabin. They just walk out, scoop some water up, and come back. But because they were all feeling pretty uneasy, and they didn't know what this big animal was that was in their general vicinity, Fred, along with one of the other men, whose name was Hank, decide to go together, and to bring their rifles, just in case.
No, it's not ready for a scream, right? I don't know what you guys are talking about, but we shall see it next. Let me know which one.
Fred and Hank begin walking over to this stream that was only about 100 meters away from where they were. The moon was out, so there was a little bit of light coming from that, but it was mostly dark. And they're walking over to this stream. Then all of a sudden, Hank stops and raises his rifle up at the side of this embankment that was totally forested all the way up the side of the valley. Fred looks where Hank is aiming, and immediately he can tell what he's looking at. Standing a couple hundred meters up this mountain is this creature that's very tall, standing on two legs. It appears to be hairy, that's poking its head around a tree and it's looking at them. They could only see it because the moon was casting light directly on it, so it was totally illuminated. As soon as Fred recognizes what they're looking at, the creature ducks back behind the tree. At the same time, Hank fires 3 shots in its general direction, and then there's silence. And then all of a sudden it comes barreling out from behind the tree and is running straight down the mountain towards them while whistling over its shoulder, looking like it's communicating with something behind it. Hank starts firing in its direction. It's clearly not striking this creature, but at some point the creature disappears. They don't know where it went. It's dark out. The only way they could see it before was because the moonlight happened to illuminate it. Now they don't know where it is. Fred and Hank abandon the water idea and they run right back to the cabin. They jump inside, shut the door, and they start barricading the door shut. The other men are like, what the heck is going on? And they start explaining what happened. They didn't know if it was a person or if it was this creature. They heard that whistling sound. All the guys are spooked. And now they're
Gifted, why? Thank you so much for becoming a member again for 3 months. You're the bestest. Not Bigfoot, it was Chewbacca. Apparently. That's funny.
barricaded inside of this tiny cabin, and it's totally dark. There's no windows, so they can't even see what's going on outside of the cabin. And so they just had to.
Hey Casey, are you gonna drop any videos for Patreon vlogs or longer videos? Just wondering. I was going to, but then I was like, why would they or what would they want to see? So let me know. I mean, I'm open to any suggestions. Because then, like, every time I think of something, I think of like, I'm like, I always second guess myself. So let me know what, like, if you have any ideas. I'm sorry, Rice. I'm a terrible YouTuber.
Sit there
Where's
and
Han
hope
Solo?
that this creature does not come anywhere near them. After a long period of total silence, the men start to feel like, okay, whatever that was, it's not coming back. It's late at night. Let's just try to get some sleep. And so the men all lay down and eventually doze off to sleep. Then at some point in the middle of the night, something smashes
Think of all the ideas. Thinking at me. No.
into the side of the cabin, causing them all to wake up. Hank's yelling out because a piece of wood that actually made up the cabin had come loose from whatever had hit the side of the cabin and fallen onto him. So the group gets up. There's a little bit of light coming through this now, a little crack in the wall from where this wood plank came out. They can see what's happening now. There's a little bit of light inside. They run over, they get this plank off of Hank, and as they're trying to kind of make sense of this chaotic moment, they start hearing what sounds like lots of people running around the outside of their cabin. Hank, who was closest to this little slat that had been created from one of the planks falling out, just turns his head to look out the slat. Because of the moon, there was a little bit of illumination, and when he looked out, he was horrified because he saw three creatures, these tall, ape-like creatures, the same one that Fred and Hank had been shooting at up over at the valley before. They're standing 10, 15 meters away from the cabin, standing upright, looking at the cabin. They're holding these small boulders in their hands. And as Hank is looking through the slat, he's trying to get a little bit closer to get a better look.
Jesus.
One of the creatures bends down and sees that Hank is looking at him, and he winds up and he throws the boulder and it smashes against this little slat. Hank basically falls over because he's trying to avoid this boulder being thrown at him, but the slat was small enough that it didn't go through. Hank's telling the rest of the men that there's three of them. There's three of them. They're right there. The men are grabbing their rifles. They're getting ready to aim out of the slat to try to take a shot at one of these creatures. But by the time they have a sight picture, there's no one out there, except they hear these footsteps and they start hearing whistling coming from the other sides of the cabin where they have no way of seeing what's going on because there's no windows and that gap in the cabin was only facing one way. And so they just sit there in silence as they hear all this whistling and footsteps and shuffling happening outside of their cabin. Then all of a sudden they hear slamming against the one door that leads into the cabin. They had barricaded the door already, so they go up and they're pressing back against the barricade as whatever is outside is trying to break into the cabin, but it can't get through the barricade. When they couldn't break in the front door, there was a barrage of these boulders smashing into the cabin. Now, these men had built the cabin. They knew it was sturdy, but they didn't know if it could withstand boulders hitting it. And so for hours, these rocks and boulders are smashing into the cabin. They never see them again through that slat. They kept periodically looking and there was never any creatures that were on that side. It was like the creatures knew that they could be seen on that side but couldn't be seen elsewhere. Finally, it just stops and they sit down in the middle of the cabin. Fred was sitting in such a way that he could actually see the slat in the cabin that was now open and exposed. And as he's sitting there, Fred is horrified when he sees a hand slide into the cabin. A hairy, big ape hand that reaches in and starts fumbling around, grabs hold of an axe that was leaning up against the inside of the cabin. And as it's getting ready to pull it out, Fred runs over and twists the axe so it won't slide through the slat. And so the creature's slamming the axe, trying to get it out at the same time that Hank takes a shot and shoots right through the slat. The creature releases it and runs away. They hear all this whistling very close to their cabin, which made them realize that they had just been quietly waiting outside of their cabin. They had never left. But after Hank had taken that shot at the thing's hand, it sounded like almost a stampede was running away off into the forest. And at that point, the group was fairly certain that it was done. The next morning, when they saw through that slat in their cabin that the sun had finally come up, the men packed only the bare necessities. They got their weapons. When they finally opened up that door, all over the ground, all around the cabin were these rocks that clearly had been thrown at the cabin. The cabin itself had obviously withstood the barrage, but there was gash marks and slashes all over it. Feeling very lucky, the men start making their way out of the valley and they make their way all the way back to town. And after the story kind of went viral, loads of people went out there to try to find these creatures, but no one ever could.
Crazy. Well, whatever they are, I mean, they're smart enough that try to take an axe from them. So. That's not a whistle. I know, right? I was just wondering. I'll keep thinking of some ideas as well. Alrighty, Rex. Sorry. Seems to be making me feel uneasy. I know, right? I feel bad for Bigfoot because we humans destroy their homes and stalk them like alien, or want to be lonely. Maybe this want to be left alone. But whatever is taking people, I think that's kind of like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's them. I don't know if it's Bigfoot, but I don't know. Crazy. Zodiac, hello, how are you? I didn't get a damn notification. Okay, how are you? Those monsters just want to be away from humanity for a while. But then, like, why were they attacking them? Why are they, like, they're, like, stalking them? I think they just want to eat them. Alan, hello, how are you? Fact. That's a good acid trip. All of them saw the same thing. Hamster. This was a long time ago, though. I forgot how long ago he said, but it was like a long, long time ago. Like think like 19 something. Like not that long, I guess, but there was no like cameras and stuff. Chilling, just vibing. Good. We should vibe and be spooked by whistles. I'm good. I can't wait for my damn MK2 loop station for real. That's so cool, Zodiac. Is that the same one that they use in um like in Swiss beatbox and stuff? Okay, he's falling asleep. Not yet. Sleeping stream. Yeah, you can loop.
In December of 1981, Mike Woolley decided he wanted to
Pretty
go
cool,
deer
though.
hunting in his hometown in Louisiana. It was a cold day, it was great conditions for a hunt, and Mike had a deer stand that was set up about a mile and a half down this old logging road that no one really used. He would take his truck and he would drive about halfway down that road, and then he'd get out and he would walk the remaining, half mile, 3/4 of a mile to his deer stand, because if he drove his truck in, he would scare away all the deer. He made it to his deer stand by about 3 p.m. that day, and he'd only been there for about 30 minutes when all of a sudden this young doe comes running across and stops right in front of his deer stand. The doe lays down and is clearly exhausted, and Mike would say that it looked like something was chasing it, and he assumed it was some huge buck. And so Mike's getting ready for this big buck to emerge when out of the corner of his eye he sees something pretty big jump out of a tree. And he kind of turns his head and looks, and it's not a buck. It looked like a gorilla. He thought, okay, a gorilla must have gotten out of the zoo. But then he's thinking to himself, there isn't a zoo around here, and there's no circus around here.
What the heck? What did you think? There's no gorillas anywhere. And gorillas are scary. Oh, you got a mic too? Nice. Oh, that's cool, Zodiac. Let me know if you do music. I can edit and all that, and yes, the one I got is the same as in the KBB. Oh, that's cool. Mo mode. Hello, how are you? I, I want a loop too. It would be so cool and fun to play around with it, right? It would be cool. It looks kind of complicated, but I don't know. Maybe that's just Me. Gorillas. How are you, Schmo? Schmo mode. Music is so fun. It is fun. I would like to make music too. I'd be doing stuff, be on YouTube and then Discord and all that fun stuff. I don't expect amazing stuff right away, but that'd be cool. I mean, as long as you're like enjoying it and stuff. Ooh. Must be but cousin of Caesar after the crash. I'm doing good, Casey. Hope you're doing good yourself. I'm good, thank you. Happy you're doing good.
So it can't be an escaped gorilla. And then he was like, okay, someone must have put on a gorilla suit to stop me from deer hunting. They're out here to try to get me to leave this spot. You know, they're anti-deer hunting.
What? Why would somebody do that to get one person to stop
And so
hunting?
they're here to screw with me. And so Mike, believing that was the case, he starts yelling to them, you know, take off your mask. This isn't okay. This isn't funny. I have a license to be here. You can't be here. You need to leave. Like, get out of here. And so this thing that he believes is a person wearing a gorilla suit just completely does not react. It's just standing looking at him. And it's about 15 or 20 meters away from him at this time, and it's just staring at him. It's on two legs. Mike starts to feel uneasy because he's thinking to himself, if this is somebody in a gorilla suit that's trying to get me to leave, wouldn't they right now announce that and say, you need to leave? They wouldn't just stand there doing nothing. And so Mike, even though he knew it was going to probably escalate the situation, raises up his rifle in the direction of this person to use his scope to basically zoom in on this person and get a better look. And when he raises his rifle and he zooms in, he immediately knows that this is not a person wearing a mask. Steam was coming off of its face like it had been running. I mean, it was 30 degrees outside. And he said he could see its nostrils flaring like it was out of breath or that perhaps it was angry. He didn't know. Even though it wasn't a person wearing a mask, it looked very human-like because it had human teeth, flat teeth. It had, he said, human eyelashes. And just the general structure of its face appeared to be human. And he thought to himself, is this a feral human? Is that possible? Is this a person that has been born and raised in the wild? And so as he's pointing the weapon at this creature, looking through the scope, just totally dumbfounded. Mike has no intention of shooting at this point. He really just wanted to stare at it. The creature roars, and Mike describes it as like a lion's roar. This thing was suddenly really upset with Mike. And Mike believed later on that it was because he raised his weapon at this thing. As soon as it roars, Mike said that about 100 meters in the other direction, he hears this really loud, piercing whistle coming through the forest. As soon as that whistle comes through the forest, the creature that
another whistle scream
was still growling stops and turns its head in the direction of this whistle. And it whistles back. And so Mike, I mean, the hair on the back of his neck is standing up. He knows they're communicating, probably about him. And as he's realizing this, he lowers his weapon and he's looking at the creature in front of him who's whistling and looking in the direction of this way. And then that creature snaps back and looks right at Mike. And as he's wondering what he should do next, another creature walks out of the tree line and stands right next to the first creature.
What the heck?
And the way it walked, it was walking like a human. It was on two legs. And they're both standing about 20 meters away looking directly at Mike. Mike is terrified. And he would say that he knew that he had to make a run for it. And so he leaps from his stand and starts running towards his...
Wait, where was he? Was he on a tree or was he on the floor?
Truck, which is about a half mile away. And he said as soon as he did, he could tell that one of them at least started sprinting after him. And he looked over his shoulder as he's running towards the logging road, and he sees that one of the creatures is running parallel to him, easily running as fast as he is. It's choosing to stay, 5-10 meters away from him, but running in step with him.
Imagine they're just like trying to scare him
the whole way. It's like it's forcing him to leave the forest. And so Mike is running, waiting to get attacked by this creature. He finally gets to his truck, he clambers inside and shuts the doors, and he looks out of his window and he sees the creature just standing there looking at him from the trees. He looks in his rear view and he sees that the other creature had also
he's saying bye.
been running after him on the logging road. That the two of them had basically herded him to his car. It was an intelligent move. Mike believes that because he raised his weapon at that first creature, that triggered a series of events that led to them chasing him out of the woods. He said that he was the aggressor, not the other way around. We don't know if either of those stories are true, but certainly they are terrifying. So I'd love to get your reaction to these two stories in the comments. Are these total fabrications, or is there some truth to Bigfoot? And
I think it's real. I mean, unless they knew each other, how would they explain like the same thing? They practically saw the same thing. The jump from his stand down would have been pretty dangerous because depending on how high up he is, he could break his leg. That's true. But I guess he was on the tree. Oh, I see. It probably whistled back, right? That's not a whistle. Victoria. He needs to find a better whistle sound effect, I know, right? As a person that hunts and is getting ready to hunt next weekend, I should not be watching this, especially at night. I'm sorry, Schmo mode. This 20-foot man's pretending to be a gorilla. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to catch up to you guys. Bigfoot is just my uncle after 12-inch drinking. He's hairy as a mofo and grunts all the time. Oh, 12-hour binge. Number 3, hello, how are you? It's just our cousin. I don't know, like, if they wanted to hurt him, they could have just done it. They didn't. So maybe it's not them that's killing people. Maybe it's something else. These Hispanics that work with my dad call him a Sasquatch because he's 6'4" and has a big, long, puffy beard and long hair. That's funny. Good, that's good. Good to hear. Alrighty. What was that one that you guys said? Just don't go by yourself mode. Don't go anywhere by yourself. Gapster or Monster? Which one was it that you guys said? Oh, Jim can't swim. Swim, I put. Oh yeah, this is the one I see everywhere. I haven't seen it though, but oh, this is that. This is he did this one. We saw this one, me and Gifted. This one was terrible. This lady, and she got away with it. Can you believe that? Can you believe it? I don't understand. Is this one? Oh, Zach, you're right. I'll put that one next. Is this one?
even if the beginning
I guess so. I'm planning to go deep in the forest alone for this big old buck that my rancher friend was telling me about. Says he saw it at the border of his forest before I went back into the forest. So just be careful mode. take a camera with you and live stream everything. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. There's probably no reception over there. But if you feel weird, your sixth sense is telling you something's wrong, don't ignore it. I didn't see it, Zodiac. Who was it? Sorry, I'm lost now. But is it this one? This one's only 14 minutes.
Am I under arrest?
For now.
I'm under arrest?
Yeah, I'll explain everything, but before I explain myself to you, before we talk to each other, I need to read your rights, okay?
What am I under arrest for?
Well, like I said, I need to read your rights first. Obviously, the charge is robbery, okay? Yeah, I'll explain everything.
I'm under arrest for robbery?
You are, but let me read your rights real quick, okay? And then I'll explain it all to you. Is that okay? You let me do that real fast? All right, Jeff.
What's wrong with what?
Can you read with me? Just read in your head, okay? Before we ask you any questions, you must understand what
Tell
your
me,
rights
Zodiac.
are. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can will be used against you in the court of law.
Tell us if you hear any whistles, right? Somewhere up in West Texas will do. If I hear 2 whistles, I'm booking it back to my truck. Yeah. You see a gorilla guy. Run.
Does that make sense? You've probably heard these before, haven't you? Does that make sense? Did you understand your rights?
What's wrong with this guy?
Did you understand your rights, Jeff? Yes or no? You understand? Do you understand what I read you? Did you comprehend what I read you?
I'm gonna just throw these people out the window.
Jeff, I'm just here to talk to you and figure out what happened and move you on out of here at least some of it. So do you understand the rights I read to you?
If you got something that says you didn't do this robbery, this is your chance to talk to us.
Okay, good cop.
No, usually I'm the prick.
You look like the prick.
This
Okay.
is Jeff. Jeff is a heroin addict and has been for the last 14 years. He is 6'5", weighs 153 pounds, and has now found himself in the unfortunate
Jesus, he's tall. You definitely want to see the responses. The results were wholesome. It's worth saying. Oh yeah, that's true, Zodiac. I shall see it. Jeff guy was the one who dressed in Bigfoot and apparently pranked police. Right.
circumstance of being charged with armed robbery. This is in the state of Georgia.
I know, right?
So if
So you're-
found guilty, they will render him the minimum term of 10 years without parole, up to the maximum term of life in prison. Jeff has been through the system multiple times over, and he will know that if indeed found guilty, his sentence will be considerably longer than the minimum 10 years due to his previous convictions.
Jeff, do you understand your rights? Yes or no?
If you don't say yes or no, what happens?
I'm not asking if you want to talk to me at this point. I just want to know, do you understand what I read to you?
So am I under arrest?
Yes, you're under arrest.
No?
Get me back to the cell. I don't talk to you motherfuckers.
Okay, fair enough.
What the
You
heck?
want a Coke?
Yeah.
You gonna
He's
go pop
smart for
open
a-
or you need me to?
Heroin addict. I mean, not to say that
Jeff
addicts
has
aren't
become
smart.
somewhat of a cult figure in the domain of interrogation footage. His recognition seems to have grown through his own popularity, as opposed to the notoriety of his crimes, like most others. Conveying the exact reasoning behind this can be tricky, as the interest in this character will no doubt vary by the individual. Yet we've found the most collective reason can be explained through a single pop culture reference: the anti-hero. While the concept is timeless, the actual term was created through the realm of modern cinema. There's a diverse number of characters passing through the decades that fit the criteria. Yet perhaps the most textbook example could be the protagonist from the 2003 feature Bad Santa, a middle-aged man simply known as Willie. This is a character that lies, cheats, steals, swears at children, drinks an inconceivable amount of alcohol, and is generally extremely unpleasant to every single person he comes across.
Look who's here, Jimmy. It's Santa.
Fucking right.
Let's tell him what you want for Christmas.
He has a YouTube channel? Are you serious? But isn't he like a criminal? Legends of Jeff? Same as the title. No way. I have to see that. He knows how the system works. That's crazy. How do they find out these things? My name is Jeff. 21 Jump Street.
On my fucking lunch break, okay?
On
Jesus.
paper, this is an extremely unlikable individual, yet for some reason, we root for him while following his story. Anti-heroes are flawed, as are we. Their moral complexity mirrors our own, and just like us, they are learning and growing as they move along the path of life. Their mistakes make us think of our mistakes, and perhaps the reason we root for their redemption is the reflection of ourselves rooting for our own. So you might be curious about the contrast between the anti-hero and the villain. One we embrace and relate to, while the other we despise and detach from. Both are driven by selfish motivations, yet our emotional response differs between them. The reason for this, while not necessarily obvious, is a relatively simple formula. The anti-hero must have a glimmer of humanity alongside a noticeable vulnerability. This is what allows the viewer to truly connect with the character. It allows us to forgive them when they are unethical, but admire them when they are noble. It allows them to be angry, cowardly, and greedy, but also cheerful, brave, and empathetic.
Who the fuck is Thurman? Is that you? Is your name Thurman?
Yeah,
Thurman Merman?
yeah.
Jesus.
With relation to Jeff, while many of us can't relate to the feeling of being addicted to heroin for well over a decade, we can certainly understand the feeling of sadness. While we may not be able to put ourselves
Doing
directly
court
in the
stuff,
shoes
I
of an
reckon, so
addict,
he's
we can
free right
somewhat
now.
relate to the
Really?
adversity
What?
that comes with it, not to mention the incredible magnitude of the situation he is going through in this video. How he responds to this very moment is quite literally the precursor to his entire future. He is at a crossroad moment in life, where on one side is the possibility of hope, and on the other side is the outright guarantee of despair. The long-term path he goes down will be the consequences of the short-term choices he makes, all of which have to be judged and decided on while going through the early stages of heroin withdrawal.
I need methadone.
You need methadone?
Yeah, you guys can get me that methadone or what?
I don't have any. Do you have medication for it, or a prescription for it? Or
No.
what do you need methadone for?
Cause I'm a fucking junkie and you guys, I can't get no methadone. I'm gonna go through withdrawal here in a minute.
Where do you usually get your methadone from?
I don't get it. I get heroin.
How long you been using heroin?
Long time, buddy. What are you trying to talk to me about here?
Talk to you about what happened last night. Look, here's the deal. Either you're in a bad set of circumstances or you went and committed an armed robbery last night.
Yeah,
All right.
I'm in a shitty, wrong place at wrong time, obviously. I didn't commit no fucking armed robbery.
All right, then let's talk about this. Let's
I
not
don't have
keep
nothing.
up
I
the
don't talk
act.
to the police, man.
I think it's in your best interest to. Man.
How? I don't talk to
you're
the
sitting
police.
Here, okay.
I've been through the system, buddy. I know how
I know
it
you
works.
have. I know you have.
You're
Jeff.
not my friend.
I'm not your friend.
You're trying to fucking get me. Or you're
No,
trying
I'm not trying to get
all
you.
you're trying to get is some fucking stupid ass fucking confession, and you're not gonna get one.
Jeff, I'm not going to get a
'Cause-
confession out of you for nothing.
Exactly, because I
And
didn't
I'm
do
not
nothing.
trying to get a confession out of you.
Okay, I'm gonna tell you, I didn't commit no armed robbery, and y'all ain't got no fucking evidence saying I did. Let me go. All you did is find me sitting in my buddy's house because my fucking buddy's dog's going ape shit. I go outside, there are cops everywhere, and they spotlight me. They say, "Come here." I said, "What's up?"
So he didn't
They
actually
search
do
me. They
anything?
ain't find
Hang on.
nothing. What's
Let
up?
me read this.
No,
before- Yes.
because I'm not gonna sign it.
You don't have to sign it. But let me read it for you. Okay?
I'm not signing nothing.
You don't have to sign it. Let me read it.
You already read it to me earlier.
I know we
That's
did. but I'm gonna
true
read it to you
mode.
again.
Thanks for the coke.
I only
You're
smoke
welcome.
cigarettes.
Before we ask any questions, you must understand what your rights are.
And here we
Cigarettes are
have our glimmer
pretty
of
bad for you,
humanity.
though,
Jeff
too,
extends
but-
his gratitude and recognition of the small favor the detective has done for him. There is no return benefit for Jeff giving thanks to his adversary, meaning there is an element of selflessness and grace in the act. There may be considerable emphasis on the glimmer of humanity.
People that try to get off heroin get sick, and it feels worse than having COVID. They throw up and puke blood. Jesus. Constant pooping. I feel like one more hit of heroin will make it go away. That's terrible. No. That sucks. Yeah, there's a lot of things that cause a physical addiction. But alcohol is actually one of the worst ones to stop doing.
Humanity here, but all we need is a glimmer to know that it's at least in there.
You have the right to remain silent. If you cannot afford a lawyer and want one, a lawyer will be provided for you. If you decide to answer questions now without a lawyer present, you will still have the right. You also have the right to stop answering at any time until you talk to a lawyer. Do you understand the rights I've explained to you?
No.
Huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's terrible, Zodiac.
Tell me what happened last night.
But you can get through it. And I think that's something that they miss a lot of the times, that they think, oh, well, like, I'm gonna die if I don't get it. But they're gonna die if they keep doing it, so.
Plain and simple. Your side of the story.
I'm not talking to you. I'm a lawyer.
All right. This is what I don't understand. I know, but this is what I don't understand, Jeff. You were sitting there talking just like you were ready to sit here and tell me what happened last night, and then all of a sudden I read that to you and you screw it, I ain't talking to you. I want a lawyer. I don't understand that. What changed just in the...
Because I told you what, I already told you what happened.
You didn't.
How didn't I?
You didn't tell me what happened last night.
How didn't I just tell you what?
But now you've handcuffed me, and I can't talk to you because you've asked for an
I want a
attorney.
lawyer.
So, okay, that's fine. But
Wait,
I will tell
what?
you right now, you're still on a hold for a robbery.
I know. I don't know why I need a fucking lawyer because obviously I didn't do nothing. And obviously you guys know I didn't do nothing because I've been arrested for the same bullshit before and you guys don't interview me this much. So, wham bam, thank you for the coke, put me back in the cell. What's that?
Just fuck with it. All right. I know we did this twice, but I gotta do it again every time, okay? Before I ask you any questions, I gotta read your rights. You understand that? Okay. Go ahead and sign there. Let me take your gift off.
Look, I'm not signing nothing. I don't want
Okay, you don't have to sign anything. You understand your rights, though, right?
Yeah.
That's all I need. A verbal yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
When's this coke gonna be here? Or is that just a fairy tale?
It's coming. He's getting there right now. He'll be
That's
here in about 2
good.
minutes. Just watch the soda.
Yeah, it's always good when people, stop doing drugs and stuff. I was a drug addict. I only smoke bud now for like 14 years. I know. Good for you, Zodiac. That's actually a really, really good thing. My dad was a big junkie back in the day. He used to do Oxy, which was really addictive, and he eventually got hooked on heroin. Oh no, finally got cleaned when he had my older brother. That's good. That's good to hear, Mode. A lot of people don't ever change. So I'm happy your dad got better too. Yeah, alcoholic withdrawal is horrible. Yeah. Osvaldo, hello, how are you? He's a Coca-Cola guy. He's innocent, I'm telling you. If he asked for a Pepsi, then man did it. That's funny.
Machine.
Blasphemy.
It tastes good.
Mm-hmm.
He's just getting all the free Coke. Yeah, it's tough. It starts with pills and leads to the hard. Yeah, because then, like, the stupid prescriptions, like, you know that it's bad for the people. The stupid drug companies make these drugs that are addicting. And then, obviously, when their prescription runs out, they have to go get it somewhere else because they get addicted to it. It's just dumb. Oh no, I'm sorry, Osvaldo. Terrible. Is he better now though? Most of my city it's Pepsi people. We have 2 distribution centers here. Oh no, why Zodiac? Which police cell is this? Alright. Well, I mean, he's like in the interview room, but that sucks.
I have enough evidence
Like what?
of the armed robbery, okay? But, you know, if you're saying you didn't do it, you need to give me your side of the story.
I didn't do it.
Okay, well, give me your side of the story. You got, I mean, convince me. Because I got a lot of evidence. I got a lot of physical evidence.
Well, like what? Name the physical.
Well, I don't need to, why should I tell you that? I mean, you haven't been anything, you haven't been helpful to me at all.
You don't, because I don't believe that you got any evidence.
There's only a couple pieces of evidence I'm missing.
Name them.
He's lying.
What's that?
Name them.
Well, why do I need to do that? You haven't helped me out at all. You give me a little bit, I give you a little bit. We go back and forth. I give you one of my pieces of evidence, now give me a little something.
No, anything I say here can and will be used against me.
Sure, but anything you say here, I can also tell your parole officer that you helped me out.
That doesn't mean dick. There's no way. I didn't do it. There's no way.
How drunk were you? Were you drunk?
No, I was pretty sober.
So you're in your right mind. You remember everything about the night, right? So you couldn't have done something not remembered. You couldn't have gone and robbed the place and not remembered?
Fuck, no.
Okay, so you would remember if you robbed the place. So I'm willing to go to the prosecutor, I'm willing to go to the parole officer and say, this guy's a good guy, he helped me out. He didn't do anything. I know you don't want to go back to jail, right? Back to prison?
Well, fuck. It looks like I am if and you're going to charge me with some bogus shit. You guys don't, I mean, what do you got, really? That I was at a buddy's house and I happened to come outside because you guys were fucking swarming the area and they
Which
fucking...
door did you come out of?
I came out of the front door. You know what? I'm not saying myself, man. I'm done, man. Fuck this. The only reason I came up here is to get a fucking Coke.
Okay.
I know. I can't finish it?
You can finish it. Make it quick. I got things to do.
Butterfinger, you promise.
I didn't promise you that. I said we'd see what happens. Right? Like I said, you haven't helped me out at all. Why should I help you out? I got you soda. That's good enough.
He wanted a
Jeff
Butterfinger.
was released from custody just under 12 hours later. And that takes us to the final and perhaps the most important component of an anti-hero, the conclusion, which unfortunately in this particular case is unknown. The final outcome of this story will vary depending on the source, some with a happy ending, others a cautionary tale. One legend has it that Jeff got clean soon after his release and now works in the corporate marketing team for Coca-Cola, while another states that he was picked up the day after for the same charge and is now facing down a 15-year sentence in Georgia State Prison. If we go by the Hollywood formula, an anti-hero's actions throughout the course of their life are so drastic and single-minded that they only ever lead to salvation or destruction, and their final decision is always dictated by what they have learned and how they have changed throughout the course of the story. The paradox here is that we don't even need the theme of imprisonment to mold the outcome of this particular story, as the theme of addiction is more than enough. Whether he goes to prison or not, Jeff will either manage to get clean and rebuild his life, or he won't. He is headed for salvation or destruction no matter what, and that single concept can perhaps define Jeff as an anti-hero. His outcome is a mystery, but either way it goes, it most certainly conforms to the anti-hero's ending.
Da-da.
Santa!
Yeah.
You're bringing my present early?
No.
But I never told you what I wanted.
I said I didn't bring it, dipshit.
Okay, good. I want a stuffed elephant. A pink one.
Well, wish in one hand, shit in the other one. See which one fills up first.
That's a good video. That's a good one. Thank you, thank you. He's okay? His channel says it all.
At exactly 3:20.
His name is Jeff. What was his name again? Oh yeah, Jeff. Jeff Bezos. He became Jeff Bezos. What was his name again? Oh my god. I forgot. Jeff something. And he wants a Butterfinger. That man's innocent. Coke and Butterfingers. Hell yeah. Drugs are bad, okay? Unless it's weed. True story, Zodiac. South Park was right. My uncle just passed away a few months ago from alcohol use. It was like 2 to 3 months ago. He was sober for 6 months, but it was too late. Oh no, I'm sorry, Zodiac. It's terrible. I'm sorry. My father was puking blood and bloody diarrhea. He lost weight. I eventually hallucinating, and he passed away a few days before Christmas. Oh no. I'm sorry, you guys, but no, that's terrible. I mean, that's what drugs do to you, and it's really, really unfortunate. So I don't get into, you know, those things. Not only does it hurt you, but it hurts like everybody around you, your family, and everybody that cares about. I'm sorry, Osvaldo. It's terrible. Sorry, Zodiac. Jeff would be cooler if he asked for reasons. I used to really like chocolate, but now I kind of just like the Ferrero. The like hazelnut ones. Or things with like peanuts in it. Oh, Legend of Jeff, thank you. Can't remember. Is that him?
Hello.
What is he doing? Oh, is this a song? Oh, he's a musician now, I guess. That's cool. Bad Santa, yeah. I think it's like also not very helpful that movies and media and music, like pop music, hip hop and stuff, like they make like being addicted to drugs seem like it's some kind of good thing, which is very not true. If there's any movie that I think really kind of like portrays how it really is, it's like in I think it was called Basketball Diaries, the one with Leonardo DiCaprio, when he gets addicted to I don't know what, but like his whole life crashes pretty much. It's all fun and games so you get addicted and start down a long dark road. Yeah, it's true. I would not change my past. It made me a better person. That's true. But I mean, yeah, I'm sure, you know, it was super tough. Chocolate is fog. It is. You're right. Yeah, he makes music. He got his own cell. The Concert Matrix. Hello, how are you? Ray, hello, how are you? The only movie that kind of freaked me out was The Fourth Kind because it was fully based on a true story. The Fourth Kind? I haven't seen that one. Train Spotting is a crazy movie about drug use as well. Oh, really? I haven't heard of that one. I have to watch it. Alrighty. We're gonna do this one. And that'll be it for tonight.
Beginning of the story feels a little bit.
It's a very underrated flick. The Fourth Kind sounds familiar. Hold on. Let me... Before I forget. Is this it? Is that girl? What's her name? Or is it this one? Or is it the same one? Oh, wait! I'm so confused. Also want to make sure you know about Donnie Darko. I have heard of Donnie Darko, but I don't think I've seen it. Is that the alien abduction one? Yeah, that's it. Which one? The first one or that one? I think I saw it a long time ago, or at least like some of it. I'm not sure. I like alien stuff, so I'm sure I would like it. Thank you, thank you. There's also on Amazon Prime, they have one called Encounters of the Fifth Kind or something. And it's pretty much all real, like, stories about, like, encounters with aliens and stuff. But, yeah. I think it's about aliens and demons? Really? See the trailer. Wait, would this get copyrighted? No? Okay. Gifted says it's gonna get copyrighted. It sounds cool. Yeah, I've seen some of those. Oh, you have? Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff, SpongeBob. Have you been concert?
Dry. Trust me when I say you want to stick around for the ending. This is easily one of the wildest stories on this channel. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload 3 or 4 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please invite the like button to come over your house to play.
I think I did that one. Oh no, I didn't. That was a different one. That was D-Lo. I remember there was a show where they'll interview people who supposedly have been possessed by demons, and they made it into a short documentary. Oh, really? What was it called? Do you remember? Not too bad. Can't complain much. Hope you have been well. I have. Thank you. And happy you've been good too. You did D-Lo. That's the one I asked. Oh, you're right. You're right, Zodiac. Yeah, I just remembered the werewolf part. I was like, wait. But I guess that's a different one. I'll try to do it, Fad Hill.
Call of Duty with you, but then give them the NES Duck Hunt remote as their controller. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story. The Chindawats were a big, tight-knit, middle-class family who lived in a cramped city in northern Delhi, India. For generations, their family had been farmers living and working out in the desert, but in 1989, their beloved patriarch, Bhopal Singh, decided it was time for a change. That year, he sold all of his farmlands and then used the money from
Why can't you take Mr. Bond seriously?
That sale to move with his wife and his youngest son to the city. And over the next couple of decades, one by one, the rest of Bhopal's children and their families followed him out there to the city and moved in with him. By 2007, there were 12 Chundawats all living under one roof. They made their living by running a grocery/plywood shop on the first floor of their house. The store was quite prosperous, not only because the goods they sold were top-notch, but also because the locals just really liked being around the Chundawats. Bhopal was this big, friendly personality that took on a sort of fatherly role in the neighborhood, and so locals began calling him daddy just like his family did. Bhopal's wife, Narayan, took on a motherly role in the neighborhood, and so naturally was nicknamed Mommy. When she wasn't taking care of her own family, she'd be outside handing out tea to workers on the street or looking after neighborhood kids. The rest of Bhopal's family, which included his 3 adult children, 2 of their wives, and 5
Which one, Zodiac? The Dilo one or the one that he's talking about? Gotta be the mullet. Why would he do this? Like, cut your hair. I don't understand. Ah, gosh. For me, it's the mullet. I feel like it makes him seem Joe Dirt-ish. Dude, Joe Dirt. Why Mr. Vaughn? He used to be normal. He used to have short hair. Alrighty, Rice, thank you so much for coming by. I hope you have a great night. This is gonna be the last one, so. But thank you, thank you. Have a good night. Have a great day tomorrow, too.
grandchildren were also often seen down at the store, and they were highly regarded and respected as well. By all accounts, the Chundawats seemed like very successful and happy people that kind of had a perfect life. But in 2007, they would face a crisis when Bhopal died. Knowing how much he meant to that family, neighbors were concerned that the family would fall apart without him. But surprisingly, immediately following his death, it was like the family started improving in all aspects of their life. It was like an already perfect family got even better. They began working extra long hours at their store, and before long, they had earned enough money to open another store and put an addition on their house. They improved their health by changing their diet and cutting alcohol and tobacco out of their lives. Their children, who were already very gifted students, began studying even more and did even better in school. And the whole family, from the youngest to the oldest, became exponentially more devout. While neighbors certainly noticed these changes in the Chundawats, none of them raised any eyebrows. In fact, people were impressed. This incredible family has managed to come out of a huge crisis better off and happier for it. Little did they know that behind the scenes, something totally sinister.
I can't go out with hair over 3 inches. I think he has long hair all over. Oh, overall. I read that as something else. Good. Never mind. I just feel like he's some backwoods dude telling me a story. He must have lost a bit. Maybe.
Was driving these changes. Fast forward 11 years to July 1st, 2018. That morning, like every other morning, locals began lining up outside of the Chundawats grocery store, waiting for them to open their doors. The Chundawats were known to be extremely punctual, and at 6 a.m. sharp every day, they opened those doors. But this morning, 6 a.m. came and went, and the store stayed dark and the doors stayed closed. People began calling the Chundawats, but none of them had their phone on. And so eventually, a 79-year-old neighbor decided they would just walk up the steps to the Chundawats' house and check on them themselves. And so up they went, they knocked on the door, they yelled out for the family, but nobody came to the door, everything was off. And so eventually, they just tried the doorknob and twisted it, and it turned. He swings it open, and he yells out the family's name, and as soon as the door flings open, and he can see inside, he nearly faints. He backpedals, he screams, he runs down to the street, and he yells for someone to call the police. Luckily, there was a police officer in the area, and so very quickly, they came over, and they cleared the crowd out of the way that was forming at the base of the Chundawat steps. They were all looking up to see whatever this neighbor had seen. And before the officer actually ascended the stairs, someone told him what was seen inside of the house. And so he's mentally preparing himself for what he's about to walk into. He walks up the stairs and he pauses right before turning the corner when he's going to actually see inside the house. He takes a deep breath. He knows what he's going to see. He turns the corner. He walks inside, and he's still completely shocked at what he's seeing. He would only be able to stay inside of the house that first trip for about 10 seconds before he too turned around and ran out of there. He would say it was just too much. It was one of the worst things he had ever seen, and that he hopes he never has to see anything like that ever again in his career. Eventually, the police would go back inside the Chundawats' house, and after looking around, they would find 11 hidden diaries. And in these diaries would be the full, awful story of what happened to that family.
Business in the front, party in the back. I'm digging his hair. Fedora likes it. I think Gifted likes it. Okay. I already had a hard enough time believing the story. True stories, Concert Matrix.
family. In the first few days following Bhopal's death in 2007, the family called a priest to lead them in a prayer honoring their lost loved one. And during this prayer, Lalit, who was Bhopal's youngest son, at the time he was in his 30s, he began chanting. And as soon as he did, the rest of his family stopped what they were doing and just stared at him. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. A few years earlier, Lalit had been in this horrible accident where plywood had fallen off of a shelf and hit him in the head, nearly killing him. He survived the ordeal, but the damage to his head left him unable to speak. But now, here he is, chanting and speaking. And so as his voice grew stronger and stronger as he was doing this chant, the other family members just continued to watch him and listen to him, and then they began whispering to each other, "Daddy has returned." Following this prayer session, Lalit kept his voice, and he began keeping a diary, the first of the 11 he would ultimately fill. The first few entries in that first diary were fairly normal. They were just reflections on his day or on his life, but pretty quickly, the entries took a major turn. The first strange entry occurred on September 7th, 2007. To that point, Lalit had been writing in kind of narrative format about his life and whatever it was he was writing about, but it just kind of abruptly stopped, and in its place was this really deliberate instruction for his family. It said they all needed to get a black and white photo of Bhopal, their patriarch, and put it in front of them, and then pray they're able to rid themselves of their old habits. From this point onward, the diary entries became more frequent, and they stayed in this kind of strange instruction format for the family. It was like it was a growing list of rules for the family to follow, and the tone of these instructions that Lalit is writing out in this diary became more and more aggressive and punitive and hectoring. It was like the family was being punished. But the family appeared to obey all of these instructions, and this was because Lalit told his family that Bhopal had come back from the dead, he had given Lalit his voice back, and he had spoken to Lalit and explained to him that the reason he was back is because he wanted to save his family's souls. Lalit explained that at night, Bhopal would possess his body, and then using Lalit's body, he would write these instructions in the diary for his family to follow. And the idea was, if you follow these instructions, that will set you on the path to saving your soul. His instructions were at first just simple ways to honor Bhopal, but quickly they became really specific directives of how each of the family members needed to live their life on a day-to-day basis. There were instructions about which food they were allowed to eat and when they were allowed to eat it. There were instructions about which things they could sell in their store, and there were
Gifted the last stream is gonna get a mullet. The deed has been done. He's growing his hair. I always liked long hairstyles, get that rock star look. Yeah. Almost 420 somewhere. Smoked them if you got them. Right. Try to see the video. I'll try Fed Hill. I'll write it down. What was it again? Let me see. Ref. Okay.
were instructions on how to invest their profits, and there were countless instructions on how they should be praying and when they should be praying. Every night, just before 9 p.m., the family was instructed to stop whatever they were doing and head back to the house, and if anybody asked them what they were doing, they were supposed to tell them that grandfather was coming. And so they would all convene in a room inside of their house, and they would wait, and then at some point, Lalit would walk into the room, he would sit down in front, and then right at 9 p.m., he would become possessed by Bhopal, and then Bhopal would lead a 15 to 30 minute long prayer. Eventually, Lalit began observing a vow of silence, and he told his family that if and when you hear my voice again, it's not Lalit, you're only hearing Bhopal. In the eyes of his family, Lalit was no longer Lalit. Lalit had become Bhopal, or I guess Bhopal had become Lalit. But either way, Bhopal was back, and so with the exception of Lalit's mother, everyone in his family began referring to him as Daddy. Over the years this went on, the neighbors did pick up on the family's strange behavior, specifically Lalit's strange behavior. But no one ever said anything about it, because despite the weirdness, the family seemed like they were really flourishing. They looked healthier, they were making more money, the grandchildren were excelling in school, and they just generally looked really happy. And so fast forward to June of 2018, which is the month before the neighbor and then police officer sees.
I guess his head injury made him Little cuckoo.
This horrible thing in the Chundawat household. That month, June, was an especially happy time for the Chundawat family because one of the grandchildren had announced they were going to get married. And so on June 17th, they have this huge engagement party. The whole family's there. They're dancing for joy about this incredible announcement. And then they began shifting their focus to planning this wedding that everyone is so excited about. A couple of weeks later, on June 29th, the Chundawats had their neighbor over for dinner. And that neighbor would later say that nothing seemed amiss. And over dinner, all the family wanted to talk about was this incredible wedding they were planning and how excited they were to go to it. And this wedding was several months away. Less than 48 hours after this dinner, the Chundawats failed to open their grocery store, and so the neighbor goes up the stairs, he opens the door, and he sees 10 members of the 11-person Chundawat family dangling from nooses in the front hallway. They were hanging very close together in a circular pattern that looked very intentional. Their hands and their feet were bound, they were blindfolded with strips of cloth, their mouths were taped shut, and their ears were packed with cotton balls. On the ground underneath them were black stools that had toppled over. The 11th and final member of the Chundawat family, which was the 77-year-old widow of Bhopal, was found dead, laying in a bed nearby with a belt right next to her. The initial thought by police is this was a mass murder, but after reading the last few entries of Lalit's final diary, they realized it wasn't. Lalit had convinced his family that just abiding by Bhopal's strict instructions that he gave them in the diary, that was not enough to save their souls. What they needed to do was participate in a ritual he was calling Vat Tapasya, which means worship at the hanging roots of the banyan tree. 8 days before their bodies were found, the family, who agreed to do this ritual, began practicing for it. And every night they'd work on binding their hands and their feet and then unbinding themselves, and they would tie nooses and put it around their neck, and they would tighten them, and then they'd loosen them and take them off, and they'd do it to each other until they were very good at doing all of those things. The day before their bodies were found, the family performed what's called a hawan, which is a ceremony of burnt offerings. And then afterwards they ordered food and then tied their dog up outside. At 10 p.m., one of the grandchildren and her mother left the house and went to a store, and then were caught on camera walking back to the house carrying these black stools that they would later use in the ritual. Just after midnight, it was time for the family to get in position. The parents helped their children put on their bindings, they got them up on their stool, and they put their nooses around their neck and cinched it down tight and told them to wait. And then afterwards, they did the same thing to themselves. At this point, Lalit's mother most likely realized she was not able to climb up onto the stool because she was hurting or she was tired, and so a decision was made to move her into the bedroom. And so she, along with Lalit and Lalit's wife Tina, walked into the bedroom, and once she was laying down on the bed, Lalit put a belt around her neck, and then he and Tina pulled on it until his mother went still, and then afterwards he took the belt off, put it next to her, and then Lalit and Tina casually walked back towards the front hallway where the 8 other family members were now in position. They're blindfolded with cotton in their ear, they have their noose on, they're just waiting, and Lalit and Tina walk around the room kicking their stools out from underneath them. And while their family slowly asphyxiates all around them, Lalit and Tina bind up their wrists and their ankles, they get on their stool, they blindfold themselves, they tape their mouth, they put cotton in their ears, they put their nooses on, they cinch them down, and then they both jump. The very last line in the final diary that Lalit kept, it says, "Keep water in a cup. I will appear and save when color changes." This ritual was supposed to allow the family to see Bhopal in person. Lalit told them that as soon as they were hanging, the skies would open up, the earth would tremble, and Bhopal would walk right into the room and save them from their death. And they were going to be able to prove that he was there, because not only would they have lived through this ritual, but also Bhopal was going to change the color of the water in the cup that was left out near their bodies. The family had even left the front door unlocked to make it even easier for Bhopal to come in and save them. The Chundawats were not committing suicide. They believed they were going to survive this ritual. This is why, just 2 days earlier at that dinner with the neighbor, they were eagerly talking about this wedding that was off in the future they were planning, because they believed they would get to attend it, even though they knew in 2 days they'd be performing this Vat Tapasya ritual. Ultimately, investigators closed the case as a mass suicide, citing the cause as shared delusion. So that's going to do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know in the comments section.
Oh no, that's very unfortunate. Yeah. That sounds good, Zodiac. Peanut butter cup macchiato. Have you ever had what's it called? Cookie butter? Cookie butter. They only had it like seasonally, but I think it was from Coffee Bean. It was really good. It's from Trader Joe's. I like the ice, but the hot is good too. Gifted likes only iced coffee. I don't understand how he drinks iced coffee even when it's cold. Macchiatos go hard. Love that espresso. Are you guys talking about coffee? I want more coffee. I'm already tired though. This is why you don't drink the Flavorade like Kool-Aid. Okay, Concert Matrix, thank you for passing by. Sorry I didn't see that before, but hope you have a good night. Thank you. Coffee is amazing. It is. Coffee is the best. Alrighty, everybody. Real video seen on best score, but I think you shouldn't watch it anyway. Oh, thank you, Zach. But yeah. That's terrible though. Like, why would you do that? Why would you believe that? Like, what was wrong with his son? Too? You think he did it on purpose, or you think he really thought these things? Who knows, I guess, but are you serious, Zodiac? And you really like Dunkin' Donuts. We have Dunkin' Donuts coffee. It's actually one of our favorite ones, but like the sorry, the coffee grounds. But yeah, that's a G. Right? That sucks. It's crazy how people believe things, especially like if you guys have seen that the newest one that he did,
Even if the beginning
this one's crazy, and this is like another story about, but this is like a cult kind of thing, but I'm so addicted to Dunkin'. Alrighty, you guys, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for staying. Hope you guys had a good time. Had a good time watching with you guys. I go to Dunkin' 3 times a day. Are you serious? Jesus. Zodiac is addicted. You really are. That's crazy. Good night, Osvaldo. Thank you for passing by. Good night, Zodiac. Good night, Fedora. Good night, Nami. Good night, Zach. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your videos. Thank you for the stream. Thank you, Rai. Thank you for staying. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Fedora, for staying. Thank you, everybody. You guys are awesome. Hope you guys have a great day or night. And stay out of the woods. Don't go by yourself. Don't believe crazy things that your family members say sometimes. Oh, thank you for the link gifted. Thank you, Fedora. You too. Bye, guys.